Weirville should be in the low 30s. So just recognize that as we go through the next slides. And this is where the families live. Oops. And the following slide would be where the kids live. That's all right. They're pretty similar. So it's the percentages are pretty similar. This slide, it really illustrates the, we asked a number of questions. So, obviously, where do you live? How many kids do you have? What's your income level? Was one of them. And these are our kind of anecdotal income levels. These are not federal poverty levels. So just know that, but this is kind of visually how we broke it out. 50,000 for 1.74 average kids per family, right? Under $50,000, we kind of designated as low income, middle income goes up to $100,000 and then above $100,000. So again, I think this is also reflective of income levels in the county generally. I think, if we dug in and did census comparison, it would probably bear that out as well. But these are not federal poverty levels because we did not ask how many total people are in the household. And that will be a follow-up question that we ask in future surveys, and then we can do that calculation. Next slide. Thank you. Boy, that type's awful small. This is how many adults are employed in each household. So that gives you an idea of those percentages. And again, we can do deeper dives into this by zip code, et cetera. Next slide. All right, this is fun. This is the ages of the children and as a percentage breakout. So if you look at that far left-hand column, these are in 2-year increments. Again, this is 0 to 12. We have a few 14 plus just because they were included in the families. But 17% of the kids 0 to 12 are between 0 and 2 years old in the county. And again, we can say that with pretty strong certainty based on our response data. So this is a great planning tool. Again, we can break this out by zip code and corresponding school district for us to plan in terms of our capacity at each individual school district and what those needs are going to be coming down the road. Next slide. So this is, I'm a data nerd, so this is a fun slide for me. It's difficult for some people. If you fly Air Force jets, and pass that colored barrier, you can probably read this slide. But if you look at this, these are the same age breakouts that were in the previous slide, but they are based on income level, right? So you've got, again, tracking from the far left in any of these columns, 0 to 2, 2 to 4, 4 to 6, and on. And if we go to the next slide, we have broken out just the 0 to 2 in those same income demographics, which paints a picture of, there's a lot of little kids that are living in poverty in this county. And also it's great in some ways because it tells us what's out there, right? It shows us where we need to do the work, where we need to focus our efforts. And again, by zip code, we can track this, what's coming down the pike for our local school districts, but also for our partner agencies, yourselves, Human Response Network, everybody else that's in this, doing this work. Naomi?
Good morning. Thank you again. Good morning. Thank you again for having us. As Anna noted earlier, I'm Naomi Gillette. I sit on the LPC in the role as the parent consumer category. My qualifications for this role are my 2 children, Dylan, who's 4, and Violet, who's nearly 2. As a working parent, I've struggled with meeting my family's childcare needs, and therefore I'm both grateful to the LPC's hard work that I get to be a part of this commission in helping Trinity families with their childcare needs. Now, Jeff may have thought he had the really fun slides, but actually I think I get the fun slides because I'm actually getting to talk to you about childcare needs, the meat of what the survey was about. So this first slide, we asked Trinity families, does your family need childcare? From those surveyed, intermittent childcare was the highest need recorded on there, followed by full-time childcare. It's the belief of the LPC that unfortunately the childcare utilization may be higher than represented due to the phrasing of the survey question. I know that I struggled when I went in and did the survey. Of the 64% that answered no, my family does not need childcare for this child, we actually believe a percentage of those respondents were currently utilizing childcare services and not actively searching for them rather than not needing them. This phrasing issue has been addressed in future surveys, so we can better understand those that truly do not need childcare and are not searching for any versus those that have current childcare needs being met but are utilizing childcare in our community. Another aspect of childcare we would like to address in the future is how many caregivers are actually bringing their infants to work, which anecdotally we think could be quite high. At a minimum, the current information on this slide tells us that nearly 27% of Trinity families are in need of some form of childcare. Next slide. This slide goes over, we asked Trinity families what types of childcare are needed. Nearly 30% of those surveys cited full day care. Because of this, the LPC has identified full-time childcare as a priority need in our communities. Childcare for non-traditional hours also ranked high, likely due to some of our larger employers in the county, such as Trinity River Lumber and Trinity Hospital having night shifts, as well as our service economy having more weekend-focused shifts. Other specific types of childcare that were noted related to having more childcare options in our community and the ever-present need for infant care. Next slide. So this slide looks only at those families who stated, yes, my family needs full-time childcare for this child. The top bar chart you look at is a breakout of zip codes that show where these families live and thus where the full-time childcare needs are. The county seat, Weaverville, has the greatest need, followed by Lewiston and Junction City. The bottom chart on this slide is a breakout of income levels of those same families. It starts at the left at less than $10,000 a year, increasing by $10,000 increments until the last two columns on the right, which represent over $100,000. While nearly a quarter of families needing full-time childcare are below the federal poverty level, this chart does show that full-day childcare is really needed across all income levels for our community, for our families. Next slide. Thank you. This slide mirrors the last, but focuses only on those families who stated they were in need of intermittent childcare. The top again shows zip codes where families live and thus where the intermittent childcare is needed. Again, the county seat, Weaverville, has the greatest need, followed by Hayfork, Lewiston, and Junction City. The bottom chart shows that same income level breakdown, again showing that intermittent childcare is needed across all income levels. In future surveys, we hope to capture additional information that will allow us to tie the income levels of families who are in need of care to subsidized care income eligibility requirements, so that we can better understand how cost plays a role in securing and maintaining high quality childcare for our Trinity families. And I'll turn it over to Anna now. Thank you.
We were also asked about the homeschool. So we'd heard when we were getting ready to launch the survey that we had a growing homeschool population in Trinity County. And we thought, hey, if we're pushing out this huge survey right now, let's embed that question into it. So of the respondents, about 13% stated that they were either homeschooling their children or planning to homeschool their children. Again, we're kind of zip code place driven. And so you can see the graphic showing where these families were that identified an interest or already homeschooling their children. I will note that this specific topic of homeschooling is outside of the realm of LPC, and we probably will not be including this in our future surveys. It's not really in our work, but we do think at the Office of Education, there's a real interest here in kind of exploring why and where, and also how we can support families that are homeschooling their children if they are looking and asking for support. All right, so here's our kind of wrap up, our key points and findings. Naomi did a fantastic job of just iterating what we saw from the data, right? So the highest needs that were identified from the respondents are full-time and intermittent care, non-traditional hours. The locations of care needed are Lewiston, Weaverville, Junction City, and Hayfork. And we also know that we just have some really significant economic barriers for our families with children aged 0 to 5. So as we're moving forward and planning and looking at policies and programming, we're constantly thinking about this income level, right? And how these families can qualify and get access to programs. All right, so what are we going to do with all this information? What the LPC is doing is we are deploying kind of an annual compressed survey of this kids count. So starting next week, not last week, as I indicated on the slide, and I see some typos in there just now all of a sudden. Excuse the errors and focus on the content. We are launching a compressed survey called Little Steps. You'll start to see that coming out next week. This is just for families with students 0 to 6. The idea here is that we'll launch these annually so that we can start getting a micro pulse of where our families are on a more clear and specific timeline. We're going to continue strengthening our existing relationships. So like I mentioned, WIC and HRN, the Human Response Network, we're really excited to see what happens with Trinity First 5 and hoping an executive director is hired and can rejoin our council. We also have a strengthening relationship with the resource and referral person in our county. And so why this is really important, when we did that local data effort and we connected with all these partners, it's now giving us anchor points as we start building systems, right? We have people to help us anchor these ideas in something that can really manifest into something that can be successful and accessible for our families. We're building out the comprehensive countywide childcare plan. That's my job. I'm hoping to have it done by December. I will say I was hoping to have it done by last December. So we're hoping this year I can make the timeline. We've also contracted out with the RCD to do mapping of this work. Did I say that already? No. Thank you. Okay. So they're going to take all of this information and layer it on top of a map. And then we can start compiling other external data sources, right? Like, some health equity information perhaps, or infrastructure needs. So we can start layering data on top of each other so we can get a real visual representation of what's happening in our county. We currently have 2 vacancies on the LPC. We are hoping to fill those. And the other thing that we're really working on is visibility. So being here today, introducing ourselves to you, giving this presentation is part of increasing the visibility in Trinity County of the LPC. For our school districts, they have been doing an amazing job overcoming some of the struggles connected to economics. They are continuing to invest in whole child philosophies. So they're investing in mental health technicians, behavioral coaches, instructional supports. All of these things are really strengths of our school districts, and we just want to note the work that they're doing. They're also looking at data and sharing it with us. So they hold so much information in our county, our school districts, and sometimes that information can be siloed. And so we're really working to compile and look at data across districts as well as with our young families so that we can ensure that as we're building policies, it matches with what school districts are trying to do, right? We're trying to, in this work, is take all of these individual plans and thoughts and put them all on the same platform, on the same space. We all know that roads in Trinity County are a real disaster and expensive and dangerous and really difficult. We're thankful for all of our school districts that continue to offer bus services. We're seeing some of those services drop across our county school districts. And we just want to continue to advocate for our schools offering transportation services. All right. So there were some staggering statistics that were revealed in the Trinity County Equity Assessment that we had not seen until obviously the report came out. So from that assessment that 31% of families in Trinity County are living in poverty, right? This is almost 3 times the rate of the rest of the state of California. That same equity assessment said that 41% of household income is going to childcare costs. Imagine your income level right now. If you had to pay 41% for childcare, what would that look like for you, right? So now that we've seen that data, we're asking ourselves, who are these families, right? Where are they? Are these the folks that are paying for intermittent childcare? Are these the folks that are paying out of pocket for non-traditional hours? Do these families not know that income qualifications have changed across the state and they may be eligible for subsidized care and they just don't know that? So some of the work that you're doing, we're digesting and we're picking up in real time, and we're trying to start applying that to the work that we're doing. So I kind of want to just talk about this analogy. So I feel like with your work in the general plan update, right, you're kind of like shaking it up, right? You're kind of shaking things up a little bit. The same thing is happening in California in the early childhood education department. Governor Newsom and the California state has taken it and shooken it up. They have taken all of these childcare providers, right? Grandma who watches the kid, Debbie who has so many students, so many children in her daycare. And they have taken the TK system and they're trying to bring these two tracks together. And so what we're trying to do is really trying to build that middle ground where our earliest daycare providers are on the same pipeline and the same track as our school districts. So we're really trying to build connection across these systems that have operated very separately and very independently for many, many years. As you are doing your work with general plan update, looking at the assessment, the equity assessment, we also see that things are kind of shooken up. And we want to also have you link into the same track and the same work that we're doing so that our families and our children have a place that is anchored and stable and accessible and available to them. Is that my timer? I think I'm close to being out of time. We just feel like there's really an opportunity right now to optimize all the work that's happening across the state of California, as well as the work that's happening right here in Trinity County. We wanted to close with just a visual. So, we three were raised in Trinity County. Jeff, Naomi, and I were all raised in Trinity County. And if I asked the three of us, how many of you were raised in poverty? My hand would still be up, right? I'm one of these 1 in 3 families. Our message to you today is that poverty doesn't have to dictate the outcomes of our families and our children. We can bring high quality programs, high quality caring adults that can mitigate some of the barriers connected to low income and poverty situations. We're going to turn it over for questions. So thanks for your time.
All right, thank you, Anna, Jeff, Naomi. Thanks for your dedication to this, for the hours that you've put in, and for preparing this for us. Are there questions of supervisors? All right.
So Anna, one of the things I wanted to make sure I was clear on, I think at one of our meetings, we talked about us being the poorest county in Trinity County with the highest childcare price.
Correct. I mean, this came from part of that equity assessment, and yes.
I just wanted to state that and how important this is for our county.
And we also seem to be under-enrolled in several of our subsidized programs. So as we're continuing to kind of tease out and ask deeper questions, we have all of these families that are eligible. We seem to have all of these needs, and yet our programs are not at full capacity. Why, right? This is the why question is kind of where we're going next. And hopefully the comprehensive needs assessment will hope to tease out some of that.
Anna, I just want to follow up. You mentioned that in this survey, you asked a little bit about the homeschooling and you weren't thinking you'd do that in the future because it's not primary wheelhouse. And then you mentioned, but it does inform you on what their needs are. And it seems to me that the homeschooling trend is like this. So it would seem that gathering more data and learning more about what we can do to support people that are choosing homeschooling kind of sound like you were moving away from something that you've done this time.
So essentially, the Trinity County Office of Education, our role is to support school districts who then support students and families. So the way that the Office of Education is designed, we are in place to support school districts. And so if we start sort of moving off of that, there's a little bit of a deviation around what the primary mission is for county offices of education. I wouldn't say that we would never include it. I just thinking like we have some capacity issues. And we also were like, well, then what would we do with that information? We have had a lot of families contact us looking for homeschool support, and we've provided it in sort of piecework, intermittent ways.
Okay. I'm trying to remember, maybe you will remember, but it seemed like between Jamie or Fabio or the gentleman who came on that school here in town, but one of our educational leaders, I thought, was indicating that they were actually trying to help create content materials to provide. Does that ring a bell to you? Because otherwise I could be making it up.
You're probably not making it up, but I'm not remembering off the top of my
Okay,
head.
so it seems to me the greatest percentage of our property tax goes to education, and I'm great with that. But the people that are homeschooling are part of that education need. And so it would seem to me that we should be finding some way that we're understanding what their needs are and that we are finding a way to support that choice, if you will, since they're paying the same property tax as anybody else.
Sure, I hear you.
Okay.
Definitely. Thank you.
I'm afraid I have to second that one. I think that because equity is such a huge focus in our whole world, really, as a country right now, and certainly as a state, that to take a piece out and just say, and I understand capacity issues, I get that. But I think that it is important to look at all of our families and not exclude families just because they are choosing a different path. And I think that there were families choosing homeschooling before COVID. I think post-COVID, we certainly have, made some new choices. The other piece I would ask you about, just with regard to that, is that the County Office of Education for many years had a homeschool program. So it seems a little counterintuitive to me. So I don't know if you want to speak to that or just take it as a comment. That's fine.
I'll take it as a comment.
Okay.
I've had this question with my supervisors many times about how we can support homeschool. So I think that it will be a continuing conversation at the county office and kind of exploring how and who and when we are able to provide that support. I'll certainly bring your feedback. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I do appreciate that. I think too, I'm just going to go a little further. Just because I homeschooled through the years, and when I had kids graduate from high school, they weren't even eligible for Trinity County scholarships because I chose to homeschool. And those are students that serve our community. They are now paramedics and firemen and engaged in apprentice programs, and they every bit work to give back to the community that gave to them. And it just does seem that exclusion level is a little hard to take.
It's a great point. Thank you.
Yeah. I want to make a comment because I feel like I can speak here just as a council member from the LPC. And of course, Anna, like many wonderful people in our community, wears these dual hats where she's LPC, she's TCOE. So I think homeschooling is a very important topic. And I think the LPC sees it as a very important topic because it is one of those options of early education. And I know Anna is a champion for focusing on the child and what's best for the child, not what's best for the state or what's convenient. But I think going forward, the LPC is definitely interested in looking at that homeschool aspect. Obviously, I personally agree with you. Anecdotally, I see an increase in the homeschool desires. In our survey response, I thought those percentages were rather high as well. And I think maybe in the past, I had also heard that the TCB had a homeschool program and was providing more support, and that maybe those numbers had just dwindled, and that homeschool programs, there wasn't enough desire at certain time period to warrant the capacity resources to it. But this is something that the LPC, I think, will look at, and as a recommending body to TCOE, to the Board of Supervisors, strictly from the LPC perspective, I think it is a component of that. And it absolutely was a component of the survey. And I think I agree with both of you that it is important to continue to look into that.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And Anna, just know that, I know that, in the capacity that you work, you are handed parameters. So my comments are not aimed at you.
Yeah, no.
Exactly. But you're also one who's, and you've pointed out today, you're looking at shaking things up and where can we raise our voice to make a difference for, what our community needs, which may be different from other communities. So thank you for that. Yeah.
You're welcome.
Thank you all.
Anybody else? All right. Thanks so much.
for your time.
Have a great day. All right, item 1.2, receive a presentation from the Watershed Research and Training Center regarding their volunteer trash cleanup day on September 23rd, 2023. With us, we have the Watershed's Operations Director, Rachel Evans. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. Do you want to put up the slideshow? So I'm here to talk to you today about our project, the South Fork of the Trinity River Watershed Cannabis Reclamation on Public Lands Project. You may have already heard about this project. It's cleaning up several trash piles that have accumulated in the Post Mountain Trinity Pines area. Next slide, please. The Watershed Center. The Watershed Center is a 501c3 nonprofit operating out of Hayfork and Weaverville, California. We conduct a full gamut of watershed activities. You may be more familiar with our fuels, forestry, fire, and watershed stewardship programs. Next slide, please. So this funding comes from the California Department of Wildlife Cannabis Restoration Program. We ended up being able to use these funds for this project because of the high nexus with the Post Mountain community next to these trash piles. The project intent is to remove all this illicit material and get this trash out of our forests, but also to engage the community to basically end the illegal dumping on Forest Service lands. Next slide, please. So our project scope is doing the site assessment and the physical remediation of removing trash. This includes hazardous materials. So our staff have gone through rigorous training with the Inner Ecology Research Center, IERC, out of Blue Lake to be able to get their HAZWOPER certification. We've also been working with the Trinity County Environmental Health Department to find a legal waste hauler who would then track all this hazardous material cradle to grave. Part of this grant is also that community outreach and collaboration, trying to get people to stop dumping and create awareness around this issue. And then subsequently doing monitoring and adaptive management after the trash has been cleaned up. So continuing to go out to these sites and see if piles are reaccumulating. Next slide, please. So why are we taking on this project? And this is really easy for the Watershed Center. This is within our mission to be good land stewards. As you can see from the picture, there's several trailers. There's about 6 vehicles dumped all along creeks and roads all on Forest Service lands. This includes hazardous materials, propane, small canisters of butane, fertilizers, but this is also mostly household trash. Some of them are your propane that you use for your barbecue. Here you can see a wide variety of plastic. Next slide, please. So there's an excerpt here from CDFW, but all of this trash is hazardous, not just to humans, but to wildlife as well. This can infiltrate our creeks, streams, and our botanical and cultural resources. Next slide, please. So what are we doing? So we have 8 sites that include all of the household trash, abandoned vehicles, etc. Some of them are fairly small, say 20 square feet. Others are quite large, like the one pictured. The largest site is probably 800 some odd square feet or maybe more. Next slide, please. So we're asking the board and the public to participate in a volunteer day this Saturday, September 23rd. We're meeting at Post Mountain Road and Rattlesnake Road in Post Mountain. We're doing this in coordination with the Forest Service for their National Public Lands Day, which is September 23rd, CDFW and us. We're asking that this is 18 and up due to the nature of the material, and that everyone wear long sleeves, long pants, good boots, and we will have some disposable gloves on site. And we'll also have some snacks and water, but definitely bring your own water and snacks as well. But we're asking that this information be released. So to wrap up, we're really trying, this project's intent is really to remediate the issue itself and change attitudes and hopefully make headway on not having these piles really accumulate in this community. If you have any questions.
Thank you for this effort and defer. Go ahead.
So Dan, I had a question. When we first took over as supervisors, we had a cleanup up there. Who was that? What agencies do we have involved in that?
That was the Forest Service spearheading that in May of 2021. They were unable to completely clean up all of the piles. They did clean up several, but they had several pieces of equipment, a full excavator, and they were still unable to clean up the entirety of the piles.
How many tons do we take out of it?
Somewhere around 40 cubic yards,
42 tons?
40 cubic yards.
40 cubic yards. Holy crap. And no vehicle.
No, they didn't have the equipment to tow away the trailers or vehicles at that time. There were about 50 volunteers and several departments of the Watershed Center came and showed up in force to come help.
Does this look worse than that?
It's basically what was left over from that event and what else has accumulated since that event in 2021.
Thank you.
Okay. Question?
I was just going to comment, I actually got to have lunch with Nick yesterday talking about things like this. At the North Coast Resource Partnership, they were looking at an ad hoc committee that might bring in funding to do cleanups, not just on public lands, but private lands, so that we could restore from an environmental health standpoint, but also so that some of these properties could be legally used again. And so when he and I were talking about that, he said that in referencing this and other opportunities that we really hear locally with the watershed and Forest Service and the Joint Powers Authority and all that kind of stuff, probably could do a lot on our own without even needing to rely on the North Coast Resource Partnership. So it was very encouraging to me and definitely something that I wanted to follow up and talk to Trent about and others, because I just think we obviously have a huge issue. Those images always just, speak 1,000 words. But my sense is that if we look past the public lands to the private lands, we have as bigger of a problem. And it's affecting us housing wise, health wise, everything.
Absolutely. We've been pursuing several grants to do remediation on private lands, but we've struggled. One part is because of the environmental compliance. It's a little more complex depending on if they had a license. Are they eligible? Did they make the mess? There's grantor provisions that kind of make those harder.
Okay.
For land that was foreclosed or somebody trespassed and made a mess. It's a little different, but for most property that, they've decided to no longer do cannabis activities and then we try and come in and remediate, there's not really grant funding for that. And so we've been reaching out to this cannabis restoration grant program and Cal Recycle, and we're trying to figure out an avenue to be able to do this work in partnership. We've talked with the TCRCD quite a bit on these same activities as well.
Yeah. Well, thank you for this. This is great.
All right. Thank you for being here, and hope that the project on Saturday goes really well. So if you wanted to give us a little follow-up on that afterward, if you just wanted to send an email so we have an idea of what your outcome was, that would certainly be of interest.
Okay.
All right.
Of course.
Thanks
Thank you
so much. Thanks for your work. Great. All right. We will now move into public comment. This time is for information from the public on matters not appearing on this agenda or within the consent calendar. All comments are limited to 3 minutes and must pertain to matters within the jurisdiction of this board. When addressing the board, please state your name for the record and address the board as a whole through the chair. No action or discussion will be conducted on matters not listed on the agenda. However, the chair may refer the subject matter to the appropriate department for follow-up or schedule the matter on a subsequent board agenda. Is there any public comment in the room? It's easy to do. She can do it.
Good morning, board. I'm Elise Hazard from Trinity Center. I work as the librarian at the county branch in Trinity Center, and I've created a survey for all Trinity County patrons of the library. Today, I will be reading some of these survey responses for you guys, along with the help of a few Northlake students who, as part of their civic lessons, are going to practice public speaking. My hope is that you will spend time reading the rest of these survey responses as a reminder of how important the county library services are and how these services attribute to a healthy lifestyle and development to so many of your constituents. So my response is, I am Elise Hazard. I'm 36. I am from Trinity Center. I've moved almost every 2 years my entire adult life, in which with each transplant, the local library was always my first place I sought out to get connected with new friends and events within the area. This was the case when my husband and I moved to Douglas City, along with our 2 kiddos. Exploring books at the library was the backbone of supporting our journey with homeschooling. Since moving up to Trinity Center, we've been able to continue these efforts at our local library branch without worrying about the extra travel time and expenses. It's also become a place where we are able to connect with our community members and engage in local community building. I have a response from Jessica H., age 32, from Trinity Center, and she writes, "We own a summer home in Trinity Center. As a mom of 3 young kids under the age of 7, we are always seeking out fun and educational activities for them to engage in. Knowing our local library branch is open once a week and is a major incentive for us to extend our summer and holiday trips to the North Lake. I love knowing that during each of our, or even during our off time, the children can continue with reading and learning." I have an anonymous survey response from RB, age 40, in Weaverville. They write, "I am a native to Trinity County. I have been a successful business owner, but in recent years have had a lot of struggles. I have been living out of my car for the last 4 months, and while I work on getting back on my feet, I've been spending a lot of time at the library. I'm so thankful to have access to computers, printers, and the internet with a clean place to work. These resources are helping me to learn more about the court system as I work to keep my family together." Thank you so much. This is your turn now.
So I'm going to interrupt you for just one moment
Mhm.
and help your kids to understand that while you come as a family unit, they are citizens themselves. And so the 3-minute timer, so your mom would have a 3-minute time limit, and in a few moments, you would probably see a stop clock appear on the screen showing how many seconds were remaining so that she would be aware. So that timer will be reset and start, and each of you have 3 minutes to yourselves as well. So if you see a timer appear, if you speak that long, you'll know what that's for.
All right, you want to go ahead?
And if you would pull the mic down, Elise, you can just, yeah, there you go.
Hello, board. My name is Zeke Davis Hazard. I'm 8 years old. I live in Trinity Center, and this is why the Trinity Center Library is important to me. Trinity Center Library has made a huge but amazing impact on my life. It has made such an impact on my life because my mom is the librarian, and it is a place to go and read books. If you like the books, you can bring them home. I also love it because sometimes my friends come too. The cool part is that it's right down the street from my house. The library is a cool place to go every Wednesday. And I also have a response from my dad, Clayton Hazard, age 40, from Trinity Center, writes, "The Trinity Center Library has been a great resource for me and my family. We have been able to check out many books and movies. During the COVID pandemic, it was a needed resource we utilized to stay connected to the outside world." Wyatt, age 9, from Coffee Creek, writes, "The library gives you access to books and you can see your friends, and there's internet and history." Thank you.
Thank you.
Should I go back?
Good morning, board. My name is Quinn Marie Hazard. I'm 10 years old from Trinity Center, and this is why the library is important to me. The Trinity Center libraries are a big part of my life. Having access to so many books in the rural Trinity County area helps me a lot. For example, if I go to my library in Trinity Center and want a book from the Weaverville Library, it would be shipped up. It's nice to have access to so many books. I enjoy being able to lay down in a hammock and read something new. The libraries are also historic. Our library in Trinity Center is next to the Scott Museum. There are lots of old records and journals that tell the stories of living in beautiful Trinity County. I also have Ruby, age 11, from Trinity Center, wrote, "I need my library because I would not discover very many new books. I I would mostly just be stuck at home reading the books I have over and over again. When you read books on the internet, it adds hours of extra screen time to your day, and you need extra electricity too. Local libraries are important too because the roads are dangerous to drive for months at a time. Kids can also walk to their local libraries after school to do research or read. Libraries are a quiet place where people can go away from the loud noise outside. They also provide a calm space where you can go to after work or school. And Gary Pickering, age 75 from Trinity Center Road.
My junior higher and high schooler are voracious readers. We go every single week. We've met friends. It's been amazing. The branch in Trinity Center has provided a way for my students and kids to have real books in their hands instead of screens. It also provides an educational space for them to collaborate and to meet with other local kids.
Hello, board. I'm Summer Kennard. I'm 12 years old and I live in Coffee Creek. And here's why I really like our library. I really like and enjoy visiting Trinity Center Library. It's very welcoming and is a great place to learn more about the community. Of course, the books are wonderful. I love fantasy and dystopian genre books. Elise, the librarian, is very helpful and is happy to answer any questions. I think the best thing about our library and my favorite thing about the library is that it's really close and we don't have to drive all the way to Weaverville to get our books. Here's another response written by Carol Fall. She's 69 years old and from the Convention Mill. She writes, I read a lot of books, mostly from the libraries. Books expand your world, giving you perspective on history, other cultures, social issues, and nature. This is something we needing our rural, sometimes narrowing communities. Too many people only get information in small biased sound bites on social media. We need books and libraries to balance that and broaden outlook. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Orion Kennard Bird, and I'm 10 years old, and this is why I think the library is important. I like our library because we can read books and rent movies from the library. I would really like to see more books at my level of reading, though, and I'm really glad it's just 8 minutes away from us.
Hello, board. I'm Wes Kennard. I am 15 and I live in Coffee Creek. I enjoy our library because it provides Wi-Fi and books for anyone who needs it. It is also a great way to socialize and meet people. It could use some books that are more of my age level, like young adult content, but otherwise it is a great library and at least helps out a lot. I also got some responses from Patrick Frost, age 69, Covington Mill. He writes, reading is a foundational way to keep the mind active and stimulated. I used the library access a wide range of reading and learning materials. I also have used the library to do personal research on a variety of topics and contribute to my health and healthy lifestyle, such as nutrition, exercise, Tai Chi, and relaxation. The idea of free public libraries is key to maintaining an informed public, and informed public contributes to civic discourse and engagement. That in turn helps guide the strategic direction of the elected and appointed officials charged with maintaining a safe and healthy environment in Trinity County. Also, Ceda Lawrence, age 69, from Trinity Center writes, "The library provides a positive environment and community members of all ages together. Senior citizens can receive help in research technology-based information, and youngsters have safe access to books and information far beyond our local area. The library is an invaluable resource for me, and especially in our rural community." Thank you.
Thank you each for your comments.
One more.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Sierra Kennard. Why I like my library is because I can meet my friends and check out the books.
Very nice.
Thank you.
Thank you each. And Summer, Orion, Wes, and Sierra, well done. All right, is there any other public comment in the room? Seeing none, is there any on Zoom?
Adrian Keys.
Good morning, Adrian.
Hey, good morning. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Supervisors. I also would like to speak in support of libraries in general. I grew up rather poor. There were many, many days where I wouldn't have had anywhere else to be inside with adult supervision if it wasn't for libraries. And in that period of time, I learned skills that I still use today. I always participated in the reading clubs, participated in crafts and other educational things. I just don't know where I'd be without libraries. So please support our local libraries. I would also like to ask, and I'm pretty sure this is how you do it. I know things changed a few years ago, but I would like to ask for consent agenda item number 3.6 to be pulled. Request one of the supervisors pulled out when the time is right. Thank you very much. Good day.
All right, thank you.
Rhoda Kane.
Hi, good morning, board, chair, supervisors. This is Rhoda Kane from Trinity Center. I'd also like to speak in support of the libraries. Local libraries are essential in low income and especially rural communities with so many children living in poverty. I know that we heard from someone else earlier today about the amount of children in poverty here in Trinity County, and how we can support our homeschoolers, and libraries are also a really, really good and important way to support the homeschooling program. I really would like to at some point see the supervisors try to get a little bit more in depth maybe and consider some other funding opportunities for the libraries. You know, they're only looking for a few $100s a year, but we really appreciate you and thank you for your support. I also would like to see item 3.6 pulled, and I'm not sure if it's this public comment period or the next one, but thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Rhoda.
I have no other recipients.
All right, thank you. With that, we will close public comment. Moving on now to reports and announcements. Reports from department heads. Are there any in the room? Director Hamilton.
Good morning, Chair, Supervisors. Liz Hamilton, Director of Health and Human Services. Just have a couple of updates. Hard to follow kids, which I appreciate their civic duty. That's amazing. So just to put on your radar with the budget conversations going on at a federal level and the potential of a federal shutdown and what that could mean potentially locally. There are in budget appropriations, there are safety nets for a majority of our programming. However, you know, we are working closely with our state partners on what that would mean to the food program, specifically CalFresh. Tomorrow would be a date that they'd be watching very closely to just see okay, what kind of contingency plans are in place. And so I can keep you apprised, via email as between today and the end of the month occurs, and as we pivot in response to what the federal government is going to do, which could look like early issuance of food benefits for October. I'll just generally say there are contingency plans, but it will be on a month-by-month basis until we have more information. Also, with the public health unwinding and the impacts to our response to Medi-Cal renewals, that Tabitha, if you remember, our program manager, Tabitha Albers, providing, I think in March on our plan, we did have our first check-in with Department of Healthcare Services on our Medi-Cal reporting, and we are on track, which I'm very pleased with. A reduced workforce. It's amazing the work that the team is putting together and doing to keep us on track. And we received nothing but compliments from our state partners on the work that Trinity County is doing. We are seeing what the state had estimated as averages. We are realizing that locally with approximately 10 to 15% of folks that were on receiving Medi-Cal benefits are not continuing in their eligibility due to income or relocation or a variety of reasons that might go into that. So I feel like we're on track. And then on a positive note and kind of on behalf of HR, we have recently implemented a employee recognition kind of guidance and bringing back some positive morale to county staff. And we just released our first survey for Employee of the Quarter. We're collecting nominations through the end of the month, and we're receiving a lot of feedback from staff, just really welcoming and appreciating this. So look forward to those announcements to you in the coming months, and then an Employee of the Year later on. So stay tuned for all the good things that baton is formally passed to our HR department head, Ms. Cassis. So thank you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Liz, I'm sorry. I wanted to make sure I understood. So you mentioned CalFresh as one example could be affected by the funding. As soon as the government shuts down, if that happens, you have to stop because you're not supposed to be using funds, or you can use funds that you still have, or you can use funds from anywhere else, or does it just stop? I wasn't clear.
So I will keep my answer very broad because there are 12 budget appropriations at a federal level being negotiated right now, and the impact. So some programs have a safety net in place. So like veterans assistance or Social Security payments, those even with a federal shutdown would continue, for example. Okay. For programs who are at risk that don't have those safety nets per se, the funding at the federal level, if that stops during a federal shutdown, that means it stops. Now, California often, what they will do is have use of their own contingency funds. Okay. To the extent that those are available.
The states, did you say?
The state.
Okay, go ahead.
And so that would shift to whether or not the state would make appropriations, but the state would have to decide on what their budget health looks like and how they would proceed. So as you can imagine, those are pretty intense conversations going on. We had this scenario back in 2019. And so we're it feels like we're reliving that era again, in which the government was shut down for 35 days. And so, I'm hoping for resolution. Yeah.
So you said there are contingency funds, and then when those are gone, then they look at what budget appropriations are, or that was kind of one category?
One category.
Okay.
If the federal government shuts down, they halt spending. Now, whether or not California wants to foot the bill is the conversation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then we have.
And we have no local contingency funds.
Okay.
Yeah.
We are blessed to have such a great food bank organization here. Do you guys coordinate, like when things like this are happening, are you kind of in the loop with them? I know you can't share personal information about people who are participating in programs, but is there any way that you can coordinate with them so that they can fill a gap if it needed?
So we have a wonderful and dynamic food bank. I mean, you're familiar with the leadership and what they've offered in our community. They are going to be in the same boat as we are if we do not receive funds. And so those are all just being worked out. And California is taking this very serious. And I'm confident in what our state, how they will pivot. I just don't have the details of what that looks like. But we communicate very closely with Jeff England.
Okay,
Yes.
great, thanks. And then last one, did I get it right that when you were talking about Medi-Cal and this transition that we went through after pandemic and all that, right?
Correct.
And are you saying that 15% of the people that used to qualify for that no longer do? Is that what I heard?
So if I can tell it kind of in a story, when COVID had happened, the eligibility requirements to obtain Medi-Cal relaxed and simplified. More people qualified for Medi-Cal than traditionally. And so now that we're reassessing the entire group on a month-by-month basis, some of those folks who had enrolled who wouldn't have done so before COVID may be falling off. We also know that people have moved to different counties or out of state, and then there's of course just regular compliance issues where all the verifications submitted, because for the last 3 years, those rules have been relaxed where you weren't necessarily, you had some waivers in place. So those are no longer in place. So we're doing outreach and we've had a positive response. It's people are checking their mail and contacting us. I definitely know our walk-in traffic is high. And so it's been a good engagement. I think our community knows how to access us when they need, and we know how to get a hold of them when needed. And it's a good relationship.
That's great. And thank you for, I know it's a group effort, but the work on employee engagement and recognition, I think is so important. I'm glad to see that happening.
Yeah, it's needed. We're coming in a season where we're fatigued, and it's good to just bring back these morale boosters and recognize the hard work across all county departments. And it's exciting. Yeah.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you. And to those within your department working so hard. So everybody does, but you mentioned that there were some particular kudos coming to your Medi-Cal folks for the work they've done. So want to acknowledge that.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Appreciate that.
Mhm.
I'll pass that along.
Good. All right, there are no other department heads in the room. Are there any on Zoom?
I have no raised hands.
All right, thank you. Moving on then to report from County Administrative Officer, CAO Tahill.
So first, I'd like to thank Liz for bringing up the topic of the potential government shutdown. Fortunately, unfortunately, I've lived the last 30 years of my life. And the process from this perspective may seem far off in distance, but there are lots and lots of discussions and details being worked out right now. And there is actually quite a bit of time left to reach some type of compromise. It will likely not be reached though until either Friday night late or Saturday night late. So that is not Liz's comments were not intended to be a warning or to raise any concerns. It was just more of an information. And there are typically very specific elements that come down with any government shutdown as far as what programs are funded or not funded. There's lots of very specific rules associated with that. So if this actually comes a reality, and starts affecting constituents of the county, we will obviously provide details and update to the board.
Thank you.
Thanks.
For grants, or for the topics that I have, the first one is grants. We've, in general terms, this has been talked about a lot, but I'm currently working with CSAC on their grants initiative program. The bottom line is there's no magic solution to grants, but there are some available resources to potentially improve our overall county access to grant writing support and also grant administration support, depending upon the resources we decide to put towards this subject. There's some free grant writing support offered. And since we are a CSAC participating county, that is available to us, and we're exploring those options and starting to share that information more and more amongst the departments. There's also a 4-tiered program available, and I would say on a pay-as-you-go type of method. There are currently 3 counties who have decided to pay into the formal tiered program, and there's another dozen or so that are looking at options similar to what we're doing. As an example, in Tier 1, which is $50,000, the Ferguson Group, who is the consultants who actually do the grant writing and training and administration on behalf of CSAC, will come in and provide an overall grants health assessment, make recommendations on structural makeup, and make recommendations on potential grants the overall county could benefit from, and then assist in the actual grant application. The higher tiers also provide some grant administration if the county is awarded a larger grant. But I just want to bring this to your attention. There's more information will come on this, and depending upon what we as a county want to do, and if there's funding associated with that, obviously we need to come back to the board for approval for that. But there are some resources out there that I believe we would benefit from, and we will continue to evaluate that and make decisions in the near future on that. Last week, I was able to attend with Christy Anderson from Environmental Health. We went up to the Burnout Coffee Creek Ranch area and met with the property owners up there. There's some environmental cleanup that needs to take place. And we were able to develop a good plan and a good way ahead for that area and for that project. On the 12th of September, there was the Quarterly WIN Act quarterly or update meeting. There was not a whole lot, what I would say, reportable items out of this, other than the Yurok and the Hoopaw Valley Tribe are still working together with the Bureau of Reclamation as co-leads to determine if a separate environmental impact study will be required for the Trinity River Division aspect of the overall Central Valley Project reconsultation effort. So decisions haven't been made in the last quarter, but it is still being worked. And that is why this is a marathon and not a sprint. The gravel augmentation environmental analysis input is being worked by DOT and Patrick Flynn, and that information is due on the 22nd of September. I've asked DOT to make sure that the potential impact to county roads is taken into account.
What was the beginning of that?
That's the gravel augmentation environmental analysis. Then as you have known and heard through different channels, with this state's legislative session, there have been some what I would consider significant legislation efforts that will have some impact at the county level. As the legislative session is just closed and those bills are now making their way or sitting on the governor's desk, we will evaluate and see what actually comes out in implementation plans and then adjust accordingly. But there will be county impact to this legislative session. So more to come on that, but just to make sure that everybody's tracking that and aware. And that's all that I've got for right now. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
All right, reports from members of the Board of Supervisors. Let's start with Supervisor Carpenter Harris today.
Been a bit of a busy time within the local communities. I had the opportunity to go with Supervisor Frazier and Trent out to the Post Mountain community and had a great time touring there with their volunteer fire department and looking at their different trucks and the needs that they have in that community, specifically relating back to the presentation done by the Watershed Center. The illegal dumping is quite an issue, and the hopes that maybe someday we can provide them with a transfer site for them to have a closer way to rid themselves of their trash legally would be great. And then after that, we continued on to the community of High and Palm, and we're still trying to work on finding solutions to solve the Garrett Road problem. And that was a good time on the ground there, just looking at maps and what's in existence and potential opportunities. I attended the TMC workshop via Zoom. It was held in Wichipec. That was very informative. And also the collaborative meeting was held this last week as well. So just trying to keep my finger on the pulse of what's going on. I have a couple meetings coming up next week on some significant issues regarding traffic speeds in front of the Sire store. So we'll be meeting with Caltrans to talk about that. And then moving on with some NACO stuff into next week. So thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Gogan.
Yeah, after our last Board of Supervisors meeting 2 weeks ago or 13 days ago, I attended with Heidi, Trent, and Rick the Science on the River at the Indian Creek Hotel. There's probably 60, 70 attendees there. The main subject was Trinity River Restoration Program rolling out their winter variable flows to the public and trying to inform them on how that works. It was a pretty good presentation. On the 12th, I was at a watershed meeting just a few days ago, and a lot of good things happened there. I think we're very fortunate to have the Watershed Center as a partner here in Trinity County. They do great work, great ideas. What they think and what they do, they get on the ground, and they do a great job here. So I just wanted to thank them for being a good partner with Trinity County. 13th and 14th, I was in Wichipec, the UROC Travel Hall there. And that was when TMC formally rolled out their winter variable flow regime and also asked for a vote for whether to implement that or not, which is 3 months earlier than they did last year. The vote was turned down. It did not pass. Trinity County had came up with kind of a resolution, something we can talk about with all the entities. There's 8 entities involved in TMC. We come up with what I thought and Trent thought probably was a pretty good starting point to try to diminish, I would say, the economic impact to Trinity County during certain parts of the winter variable flow. I think we had good buy-in down there for our talks. We had 5 of the 8 people in that group ready to sit down and discuss the way we could work this out and have the winter variable flows possibly work and not affect our lake levels or our economy very much. And at the meeting, we thought we did well, and we were off to negotiations. And the next day, Mike Dixon from TRRP sent out an email and said that we can't do that. So we are right now I guess we're in the middle of trying to figure out why we can't do that and possibly why Mike Dixon has the authority to tell us why we can't do that. But we feel that we probably will be able to continue the negotiations. We're doing it out of just the best thing for Trinity County. And hopefully we'll get to do that because it's very, very important piece of the puzzle here. And it's a giant puzzle. As Trent said earlier, this is a marathon, not a sprint. And this is probably going to be one of the longer marathons you've seen. So I think everybody needs to, not just the winter variable flows, but everything that we're trying to do is a monumental task. And I'm lucky to have Trent and Heidi on board with me. So I think we're going to make good headway. But again, this is a marathon, not a sprint. So we will keep on trucking. And that was about it for my out of county travel, my meetings, and that is it. Although I did have one question for Trent on your report out. So CSAC, is this the first time we've used them for additional help in kind of getting grants or elevated their status with the county as far as using them as a?
The specific grant initiative they've got going is relatively new. Brian Rutledge is running it on behalf of CSAC, and he's sent out some informational type flyers and documents to larger groups. And then he and I and the Ferguson group sat down and went through some of the more details, if you will. So there's definitely some opportunities there. And, you know, since we are a member of CSAC as a county, it makes sense to look at some of these options. Some of what they're providing is already, you know, quote, free in our membership dues that we pay. But the other aspects of, you know, above and beyond kind of the free piece of it is probably what we'll really start analyzing a little bit more.
And there's a possibility they'll do the administration part of it all?
They will at the higher tiers. You got to get up into tier 2 for that, and that's at the $100,000 range. But they will provide full administration for a large scale grant at that level. Yes.
Well, thank you for taking advantage of that. We need that. Appreciate it, and appreciate them helping us out.
Yep.
All right.
I just had a question with the TMC and the winter variable flows. So I heard that the TMC voted to not support the winter flows for next year. And then I think I was hearing you say you guys were presenting some options on how they could do the variable flows, but with a less of an economic impact. So I'm trying to put those two together.
So we've come up with some talking points on how, I don't want to say that they can do the variable flows. That's not a,
okay.
It's not a given that
Mike.
even with what we say that we're going to do the winter variable flows, we just had some alternatives that if we kind of hit the mark, the winter variable flows would be less impactful to economics and the health of the river, especially in the second part of their winter variable flows, the February 15th, April 15th part. Still a lot of discussions to go on that, but we're just trying to reduce the impact if it does happen. And right now it's not happening.
Okay.
To Trinity County.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Supervisor Frazier.
All right, not a lot to report. As Heidi reported out, Heidi, Trent, and I did meet, went and had a tour Post Mountain, and went into High and Palm, looked at the Garrett Road situation. That was on the 7th. On the 12th, I went 12th. I went to the Ruth Lake Community Service District meeting in Mad River, and then on the 15th, I went to the Six Rivers Senior Citizens Luncheon, also in Mad River. Other than that, I didn't have anything going on. Tomorrow, I go to Orland for CGT CAP, Calusa Glen Trinity Community Action Partnership. So I'll be in Orland tomorrow. The North Coast Unified Air Quality Management District meeting for this month has been canceled due to CSAC. And I think that's all I've got going on in the near future.
All right. Thank you, Supervisor Lutweiler.
I had no out-of-county travel. I have been asked to facilitate a strategic planning session with the board of Nortec. This is the workforce management group. And I think that's really encouraging because what I'm seeing is that group is really coming together, trying to figure out how do they need to evolve as funding sources evolve and things like that. So it was encouraging that they want to spend part of our next board meeting doing strategic planning. Similarly with SCED, which is the economic development group, it appears that we have agreement at the next board meeting that we will have a discussion about performance scorecard. So we actually had the discussion at the last board meeting where I said, well, how do we know when we're being successful? How do we measure that success? And there wasn't clarity. And so we said, well, then let's have some clarity. So hopefully that will be a productive conversation coming up here at the next board meeting. We had the PSA2 board meeting, but I'll let you speak to that. I mentioned about the illegal cannabis site cleanup. I'm encouraged by that conversation with the watershed folks. And I did want to mention, I actually see that Skylar is here, but there was an announcement recently from Fire Safe Council about community meetings in October, so that the communities, it's only 45-minute meetings and their site has all the information, but we can get communities on board with, make sure they have board members, make sure they understand what they can take advantage of through those programs. There is Firewise landscape training coming available. There are free chipping days becoming available. And I think it's Fire Safe Trinity on Facebook is where you can find all that information. But I love seeing all these things happen because great resources for us. And I think, I can't remember what you had shared in the fire chiefs meeting, Skylar, but there was a pretty good number, like a record number that took advantage of the chipping last time, but you're hoping to break through that. So the more the merrier is kind of where that's coming from. Okay, that's it.
All right, thank you. Thank you for that. I was going to report out about Fire Safe Council too, just in what's going on at the RCD in terms of what was shared with the Fire Safe Council. I guess the piece that I would add to it is that if you have any kind of group that you would entertain Skylar coming to, she is looking for ways to more broadly get the word out and is willing to provide those kinds of interactions if that is a means by which we can get the word out more efficiently. With regard to PSA2, there are some audits that are required. And so I won't bore you with the details, but just to assure you that the executive director and her staff are very much handling this in a productive way. They have secured the auditor who is specific to these areas and knowledgeable in them. And everything that was needed in order to move those things forward was passed unanimously by the board yesterday. And so that's all well under control and moving forward. And it was nice that the advisory council pointed out that in the expansion of all food banks in our collaborative counties, Trinity County is highly unique. They tripled in capacity over the last 2 years. And while we are aware of that, I never grow tired of pointing it out. It's wonderful what they do. As far as the collaborative meeting that Heidi spoke of, I too was in attendance and would like folks to know that the desire to get alert wildfire cameras placed in strategic places throughout the forest is being revived, and action steps toward that end are being taken by various members of the group. So we will certainly keep you updated as efforts continue to progress there. I am leaving today. We'll be in Monterey through the rest of the week for the RCRC annual convention. And to that end, if Heidi, or I'm sorry, Ashley is going to adjust the cameras a little bit. So one of the things that happens at the RCRC convention is that baskets are put together and there is an auction. The money that is raised goes to the county of the chair. And so, you know, I wanted to represent Trinity County well. And so I looked for some partners to help with that. And so I reached out to the Weaverville Chamber of Commerce, and those ladies are always so anxious to help. And Amber Carmen of the Water Board was incredible. She worked to gather 22 local businesses contributed. And I'm going to quickly name them. I just am. All Home Chocolates, Alpen Cellars, Amrita Yoga, Bethany's Nails, Bliss Acres, Danny G Posity, J&J Smokehouse, Karen Metcalf, Lakeview Terrace Resort, Lewiston Hotel, Monica's Tattoo Parlor, Pieces of Glass, Rockslide Bar and Grill, Sacred Botanical Smokehouse Market, Straw House, Coffee, Stuff by Connie, The Water Bar, Trailhead Pizza, Trinity Lake Marina. And that's 20, and the other 2 would not be businesses, but schools. And so among those businesses, there were gift cards donated to restaurants. There was jewelry and apparel donated, coffee, wine, chocolates, lodging, personal services and excursions, and then just miscellaneous personal items and some decor items. Our goal was, we kind of looked at this from an equity perspective. Would Trinity ever be the county of the chair? The odds are there for anybody. If it was a perfectly equitable world, it would take 40 years for that to happen for us because there are 40 participating counties. So the goal was, okay, how can we make this good for Trinity County? So what we said was, let's see if we can get whoever wins or purchases our basket to come to Trinity County. If they can come and stay here and eat here and play here, they'll come back because everyone loves to once you see it once. So that was the focus of it. And then the other piece, and so between the lodging, somebody would probably make 3 trips here, which is wonderful. Then I reached out to the high schools, and what you see on your camera right now is the contribution from Hayfork High School. This was created by Hayfork FFA shop students. That is cut out of metal and painted. And then Ashley will slide the camera over and you'll see a very similar contribution from Trinity High School. Students of Tabitha Plew. So Ty Moody and George DeBono did the cutout. They did all the cutout portions of what you're seeing there. Von Ryan, Colton Halliday, and Jack Winia prepped the material and taped and painted this. And Jamie Green told me that a similar piece to that was provided to an auction for a fundraising event on the coast and raised $1,200. And so it's just exciting to see what our local students are doing and what our very dedicated teachers are guiding them in. And so those 2 pieces, along with the other contributions that I mentioned, make Trinity's basket have a retail value of $3,740. So I am so grateful and appreciative and very proud to take this from our county and be a part of that. So there certainly will be a report out of at our next board meeting of all the goings on at the annual convention, and we'll hear about that then. All right, that is the end of my report. Moving into reports from the ad hocs, Trinity County Water.
I think we touched on the water already.
Okay. Right, a cannabis ordinance ad hoc.
Okay, the last meeting, we worked some more on the content that will be being shared with the public for the public workshops. And I just want to say, I think there has been a lot of great work done on this. It's very comprehensive and it's not done. You know, this is not meant to be, here's what we wish we were putting in front of the board to be approved today. But it is a very, very strong starting point that is meant to establish the framework for good public engagement. That will be, Trent, am I right, today will be released. So that information will be available to the public today. And then I believe the dates are September 28th and 29th for 26th and 27th. We'll confirm here in a minute. But we are having 2 public workshops. One will be, last I heard, at the VFW in Hayfork, and the other will be in this room in Weaverville. We are hoping that both can have Zoom capabilities. They will be facilitated discussions, so we'll have the information out there that people have had a chance to review for a week or so. We will have an agenda to kind of take us through the areas that we know we need a lot of good input on. And what we will do is then take that input and make whatever adjustments we think are appropriate to then take to the Planning Commission. That will be another chance for public input, and then we'll take input and make adjustments, and then that'll become before the board, which will be yet another public input opportunity. So we're really trying to make sure this is as transparent, as engaging as possible. Trent, were you able to confirm those dates?
That's Tuesday, the 26th at Hayfork VFW, and then Wednesday, the 27th here in this facility.
Okay, and I can't remember, do we have times yet on those that we've announced?
6 p.m.
6 p.m.? Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
So I have a question there. Are other supervisors allowed to go without breaking the Brown Act?
It's a public meeting, correct?
Yes.
You can attend, you cannot participate. Who is not specifically designated.
Okay.
Sure.
Anything else?
I think that covers cannabis.
Oh, I did want to mention, I think we're working on this. We'll know for sure as we go. Besides the focused agenda and facilitation, we at least talked about having input forums, because even though we're planning to have these very engaged meetings, people will likely have input beyond, they won't get their input in, or they'll think of something afterwards. So we're trying to create kind of a structured way for that input to come in so it's more easily used. And again, we'll try to do the streaming. If not, hopefully we can get that information out to you. Okay, that's it now.
Okay, very good. On economic development, I guess on my end, I would just say that there were some deliverables that I was expecting back from the Deputy Director of Economic Development at RCRC that I haven't received yet, but I will have ample opportunity to engage with him over the next few days, which will be enjoyable and productive. So I'm not terribly worried that I haven't received what I wanted, just because I do have an opportunity to chat with him in depth coming up. So more on that to come. And that's all I have for this.
Okay. I did want to mention the SURF funding, which we've talked about before, which is a pretty large amount of money that's available to the North State region. That work continues. I guess I would say it continues at a slower than I would like to see pace. The good news is it gives us more time to be ready to make our best impression when it's available for us to submit ideas. The bad news is it's just taking too long to give good clarity about what kind of projects will be the most successful. So we're taking the approach that we're fine-tuning our own ideas, and we're going to start reaching out to other counties that we think might want to join in so that we can have multi-county support for an idea that has its own unique implementation within those counties, thinking that that might help us have a better chance of winning funding.
Yeah.
So we just keep plowing ahead, even though I really wish that the whole process was coming to fruition more quickly. And I just want to acknowledge the work that Jill, you and Trent and Dee and Eric, and I'm sure Trent, you pulled in a lot of people from the county as well, but that CD Hall and renovations work, I was barely involved, but I know from my observations, it was a ton of work, and that while that's more focused on resiliency, it still could have a nice economic impact too. So I thought that was really good.
It absolutely could. And if we were successful in that, it certainly could have a trickle-down effect on us looking more favorable for upcoming grants in the future. There were large pieces in there about what our history in being able to receive and successfully administrate those kinds of large-scale projects. They want to see that. So that would be good. I appreciate you bringing it up. I was also taking note about it as you're speaking, because I do want to really highlight and appreciate our CAO's work on that and pulling in his staff. And also just want to make it clear that there was as limited as hours of staff time as possible, just so that folks realize from a county financial standpoint, our CAO really leaned in and spent many hours making that a successful submission alongside Eric Keys. And his work was funded by a local donor. So that was all successfully wrapped up and submitted on Friday. And I think we should also point out that Alec Domka, who is the UC Cooperative Extension representative for us, did provide the feasibility study that we asked for, and it was a piece of that grant submission. So wonderful to see that opportunity being taken advantage of by Trinity County, because for many years it had not. So that's up and running, and that's really positive. So end of report there. We're going to take a break before the consent calendar, but I want to circle back briefly because I want to report out on the closed session of our September 6th meeting. That was item 5.1, Government Code Section 54954.5C, Conference with Legal Counsel, Existing Litigation, Number of Cases 1, Carlson et al. Versus County of Trinity et al., Trinity County Superior Court Case Number 20CV136. And the report out is that direction was given to staff. With that, we're going to take a 10-minute break and return for the consent calendar.
Well, because it's the.
Okey dokey. This will come to you.
Oh,
I passed the church on the way.
Droning.
I miscalculated on my chair, almost fell over back.
Oh. You can't just make it a watershed.
Right, whether we have to do a watershed or not, that really means nothing.
So really we're.
Oh, I just squeezed him.
I
just squeezed
him.
It's.
You just squeezed me for $190 pair.
Okay, it is 10:47
Happy to pay for them because Ryan was like.
and we are back in session. Moving into the consent calendar, these items include routine, non-controversial matters and will be acted upon by the board by one roll call motion. If a member of the public has questions or comments on an item on the consent calendar, they may provide them now. A member of the board or staff may request an item be pulled and considered separately. So in response to the public comment received earlier, I will be pulling item 3.6. Are there any other items that board members would care to pull?
Are you gonna wait till after public comment before that?
I sure am. We'll open public comment on the consent calendar. Is there any in the room? Seeing none, any on Zoom?
Rhoda.
Good morning, Chair, Board of Supervisors. This is Rhoda Kane from Trinity Center. Of course, I do believe I already mentioned item 3.6 for pulling. I'd also like to comment and maybe suggest pulling item 4.4.
So item 4.4 is not part of the consent agenda
Oh,
and you'll have
okay.
opportunity to comment upon that separately in a little bit.
Thank you very much.
You bet.
Adrian Keys.
I apologize. I'm just waiting my turn to comment on the pulled item. Thank you.
Okay, sure.
I have no other raised hands.
Okay, with that, we will close public comment, bring it back to the board. Are there any other items besides I will be pulling 3.6? Anything else? All right, hearing none, I would entertain a motion on the balance of the consent calendar.
I'll move to approve.
Second.
Motion by Supervisor Frazier, a second by Supervisor Carpenter Harris.
Supervisor Carpenter Harris.
Aye.
Supervisor Frazier.
Aye.
Supervisor Gogan.
Aye.
Supervisor Leutwiler.
Aye.
Chairman Cox.
Aye. All right, item 3.6, planning and zoning, approve amendment number 2 to the agreement with SHN Consulting Engineers Incorporated, extending the term to September 30th, 2024, and updating exhibits A and B to provide staff support for processing land use projects and the county's Surface Mine and Reclamation Act, that's also known as SMRNA program, up to $100,000 from cannabis and planning funds, depending on the project assigned. I guess I would initially start with Cia Tuthill to have any comments or defer to staff.
Without specific questions, I don't have any comments yet.
Okay. We do have planning staff in the room. Did you care to speak to the item at all?
Morning, Chair, Supervisors. Ed Bresley, Interim Deputy Director of Building and Planning. This is actually just a boilerplate continuance of what we've done since 2018 for the planning and building, or planning and cannabis divisions. So essentially, for anybody that's been taking notice as well, we actually reduced the amount from 200,000 down to 100,000 this year. For just cuts and the way budget stuff has been going. So I'm actually a little bit anxious to see what the questions are, because we're actually cutting their involvement in anticipation of getting more planners on.
Okay, certainly. I can only anticipate the questions. We'll certainly let them ask their own questions, but I think I would wonder, it is a SMRNA, SMRA is different I think, in scope from what goes on in the cannabis world. And so perhaps a question might be, it's all lumped together in this $100,000 chunk. Can you divide that out at all for us?
So the biggest portion of the line portion will be, I can't give you percentages because I don't know what's going to happen over the next year, but the line portion is going to be planning. And then the second portion would be SMARA support. And then the third, if needed. So as we probably already know, the Laco and Helix are already on board as consultants. This is specific for any planning projects that need support. It's used sparsely. So I don't anticipate a lot of money, but for there to be any money, it needs to be reflected in their budget. So that's the reason why it's on there.
And also, if this is passed today, is this a blanket amount that the specific amounts would then not have to come back to the board, correct?
Right. This is not to exceed. So it's just up to a certain amount.
Okay. All right. Any other questions from board members at this time? All right. With that, we will open public comment on item 3.6. Seeing none in the room, is there any on Zoom?
Adrian Keys.
Thank you, Chair and supervisors and staff. And of course, I'm asking these questions with all due respect. I know how much work goes into putting the budget together and how difficult that assignment is. My concern is that I'm uncertain as to why the fee payers across the cannabis program would be paying for services that they're not going to be receiving. CUPs in cannabis and generally, under my impression, were paid for by the applicant. And I believe me, I'm certainly happy to see the number down. I'm well aware that it has come down as so many of the other parts of our budget have also come down. For me personally, when I look at this, not knowing how the funds will ultimately be allocated, using the $100,000, not knowing how many projects it'll support, it's basically asking me for between $400 and $500 for services that I do not benefit from. I understand that SHN has been contracted with the county for many, many years and has provided services throughout that time to cannabis projects. It was, again, my assumption that those were paid for by the applicants. I don't know how many cannabis CUPs are in the pipeline. I couldn't imagine it's going to be very many. So ideally, the cannabis funds will not be drawn down very much because, as we can see, when we look at the budget numbers, transfers out of the cannabis division continue to bring the program itself into the red. And until that bleeding is stopped, I just am looking for accountability and I'm looking for consistency in our program. So as it's written, I would have a hard time supporting this. And the SHN does all does the planning and CUPs and such broadly for the county. I would assume they're on fee for service. I also am well aware of watching all the progress of CUPs over the years in the cannabis division, that many people have chosen to use their own consultants to prepare their documents and not used SHN. And generally those documents have passed more quickly through the process. So I could also anticipate in the future, if there will be future cannabis CUPs, that it's potential and even possibly likely that those individuals will then hire their own consultants because they want to see the program finished in less than the 3 and 4 years that we've seen consistently with SHN projects. So that expresses my concerns. I appreciate the time. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Adrian.
Rhoda.
Good morning again. Rhoda Kane, Trinity Center. Of course, Adrian pretty much said it all. Obviously, we're really concerned that the funds from the cannabis department are going to be used to fund all sorts of different projects around. I just find it a little concerning that under fiscal impact, it lists the up to $100,000 from cannabis and planning funds, depending on the project assigned. But why isn't anything else listed under there as possible fiscal impact unless you plan to take all the money from the cannabis department. It's just a little concerning that it doesn't show any other funding source and that it's just this big blanket of unaccountability. And thank you for your time.
Thank you, Rhoda.
I have no other raised hands.
Okay, with that, we will close public comment and bring it back to the board. I guess a question I would have is whether or not, couple questions. When we talk about planning, that isn't necessarily cannabis, correct?
Correct.
And so would there, but I also understand them wanting to have transparency, accountability in each of these areas. Is there a way to take that $100,000 allocation and separate it out to where you're asking for a certain amount, a known amount for cannabis, a known amount for SMARA, and the balance for planning project support if needed in the future?
You know, I would say that you probably could do that. I don't know what those numbers would even look like, because every year is different. It's kind of like taking a known amount and saying, well, that's the known amount. We're going to have that same thing again. I don't think we could even do that from last year to this year with cannabis projects. And, you know, it's not just CUPs. It's any time a planner has a question that is sitting in the cannabis division and says, I just want to be sure on this. I want to get a peer review. I want to get some kind of a support mechanism from a higher level planning institution. So it backs up the decision that they're giving to the division director or to the project itself. It's not necessarily going through the CUP process, but every single one of the expenditures that probably will be documented, every single one of the expenditures will actually be name, place, date, time. This is the project that was worked on. This is how many hours. All that's itemized now because they have to do the fee study, and all those hours have to be taken care of. It also comes out of the LJAG funds is where it's gonna come from. So
Could you define those funds for me? I'm sorry.
the local area
Oh,
local
okay, yeah, yeah, yeah.
jurisdiction area grant.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Other discussion or questions?
I think that answered my question. There's going to be an accountability there where each, I can see that any hours billed by SHN will be itemized to each department. So the planning department's not going to be paying for SMARA, and cannabis is not going to be paying for planning. It's a lump sum that we're allowing to be paid to SHN to cover all three of those areas. So, and there'll be accounting showing where it went. And so I'm comfortable with that.
Yeah, like Ed had mentioned before, this is a not to exceed amount. This doesn't mean any particular area, whether it's planting cannabis or SMARA, is going to spend the full $100,000. This is just a not to exceed amount from a budgetary planning authority that then gives authorization to Ed and his team to actually work these particular projects. And then like Supervisor Fraser was saying, as they're billed, there's very specific accounting as far as what funding source those particular hours are tied to. And we can't say right now for the next year that, hey, there's going to be, 50 hours spent on planning and 20 hours spent in cannabis and 4 hours spent on, mining issues. You just don't know that right now. This is strictly a planning factor number. And because we have one planner that's relatively inexperienced. So we need to have some backup to get adequate answers and to make sure that we are providing the appropriate level of detail and accuracy when some of these complicated issues come before us.
Sure.
Okay, so I think I have a few. So this is basically saying we want $100,000 to be available for use in these ways.
Yes.
Those funds are coming from where?
LJAG for anything that is cannabis related. And the rest is budgeted out of the planning department.
the planning department, this says specifically from cannabis and planning funds. So some of it is coming out of funds for the cannabis division and some is coming out from the broader planning division?
From planning division, yes.
Okay. And so I was trying to make sure I was following Adrian and Rhoda, and I'm not sure that I did, but what I heard primarily was concern that application fees that are the fund for the cannabis division then are being used for things that aren't benefiting the program participants. And so I think what I'm hearing from you is if we're taking cannabis funds, they will only be spent on cannabis related activities, and that would be reported as part of the normal process, budgeting, reporting, so on and so forth. If they are out of the broader planning department funds, that's what would be used for broader planning department work. And so there wouldn't be if all that is held true and it's accountable and it's transparent, then there wouldn't be a concern for what I was hearing from Adrian and Rhoda. Is that
From my standpoint, definitely no concern. It's all
Okay.
itemized. It's all, it all has to follow very specific guidelines. So you can't just go and spend money. It's all itemized. And so at, any kind of budgetary transaction that you have, there's going to be a place where it came from and where it went to.
okay? Chair, I'm just wondering if you would authorize for just a follow-up question to Adrian so I can make sure that I'm, if there's still some unmet or concern that isn't being addressed, I'd like to understand that.
So the only way to do that without engaging in the public in this discussion would be to reopen public comment and have those who have further questions that have been unanswered to be able to ask them without directly engaging in conversation with us. And I'm willing to do that. So I will reopen public comment. Is there any in the room? Seeing none, any on Zoom?
Adrian Keys.
Hey, thanks again. I really appreciate the opportunity to clarify. I fully am in alignment with both Mr. Presley and Mr. Tothill's comments about how the budget is, how allocations work. I do understand that. I do work on the county fairs budget, and I get, we manage over $1 million in assets, so I do get to do this kind of work otherwise. So I'm clear on that. My question is if these accounts are traceable and they're for specific projects, that it should be the project applicant who's funding that. And so maybe we need this little bulk of money to maintain the contract with SHN. But at the end of the day, if we do fee recovery on these, there would be no drawdown of that $100,000. I'm not particularly pleased with paying for other people's projects out of my pocket. And I heard it's coming out of the LJAG line item, but that line item is included in the general cannabis budget from what I understand. So it's still coming out of the budget and it will be drawn down at some point to where there's no funds left there. I certainly, again, not trying to cause any kind of trouble or anything, but we've had a really hard time maintaining our businesses here in Trinity County. And we are going to continue to, really look closely at these items because, as Mr. Presley said, obviously there's regulations about how funds can be used, programmatic funds can be used. And quite frankly, I have questions if the county has actually upheld that standard historically. And so I'm always going to be concerned about interfund transfers, allocations, so on, that, programmatically impact the cannabis program, but also then on the individual level. It has been an intense struggle to maintain viability, taking money from the cannabis department that is paid in for by the program participants for use for an individual's project. I just find to be objectionable. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have no other raised hands.
Okay, thank you. With that, we will close public comment.
I have another question really quickly that I'm remembering. In the past, it seemed like SHN was not utilize that much for cannabis projects. Is that still the case going forward? I can't remember if that was their choice, our choice, but it seemed like the SHN wasn't involved with cannabis for a long time. So do you see them being involved going forward?
I don't see any increase in their involvement at all.
So I mean, are they involved at all now?
Yes, very minimally, but yes, on particular projects, when there's a peer review that's needed or some, real high level of planning question that's asked and they just need the answer to it before they push a project forward, those happen, but it's very minimally. Like I said, I don't know if I actually told this to the board this morning, but what I actually did was went into what this looked like last year. And then I just copied everything to this year, updated the amounts because that was the only thing that changed. So I don't anticipate any more involvement from SHN than what we've historically seen, and that's minimal.
So I guess from my standpoint, and correct how I view this as needed, but we have a planning department, which underneath falls a cannabis division and underneath falls need for your surface mine and reclamation projects. And then other planning issues that come in that we just don't have staff that have capacity to meet the needs of, that then we would need outside consulting services for. But the fact that those three things then all rest underneath this planning umbrella, and I get that, hey, we've got one entity, SHN, that we're looking at how much can we pay them. We need this kind of, overarching umbrella. And that seems easier from your perspective to say, these are where the needs are going to fall in these three areas, and this is the entity we want to pay. But I would feel more comfortable, and I get that it would be some level of more work to say, we anticipate, because you had said with cannabis, it's going to anticipate it to be very few questions. We're going to say $20,000 for that, and we're going to, whatever those numbers would be, rather than having the blanket amount. And even though people can say, in whatever the process would be to inquire of, okay, what are the billable hours and where are we at? I think it would be easier to know that I'm only inquiring about, a potential $20,000 worth of possible expenses versus what portion of 100,000 might I be kind of looking to track and ask for.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, it makes sense to me. I just looked at what we did last year, what passed last year, and said,
sure,
just do
fair.
the same thing.
Mhm.
That's it.
Yeah.
But do we have the data to know how we would break it down further right now? I'm assuming not.
I'm sure we could pull up last year's data and make predictions. I don't know how accurate it would be because, again, we don't really know what the projects are going to be this year. Every year, you just don't know. So, I mean, we could certainly save $20,000 from the LJAG, and if we exceed that, we bring it back to the board for an increase, So I just looked at it as it's simple, put it on paper and move forward. But I mean, it's whatever the board wants.
Well, I think with that, I would like to put a motion on the table that
Well,
this.
Can I ask another question real quick
Certainly.
before you do that?
Mhm.
So one of the questions that Adrian brought up in public comment was the fact that these are generally funded by the applicant. So this $100,000, if we pay SHN $12,000 to get us through this cannabis project, and then we collect that $12,000 from the applicant to cover it, where that's what one of the questions I have. Are we actually keeping track of that? And then when do you run out of money? Because you have the $100,000 that's basically just to cover expenses until you get paid. How is this working?
Well, it's the difference between having a fee study and having a full cost recovery model. So the full cost recovery model is being attempted, trying, but there's always going to be those questions that somebody might have. And you could have one question on one project and a completely different level of involvement on another project, so that for it to all balance out, basically, we have to charge a particular amount for the fee And that's what we have to take it as. And then for now, until everything gets normalized, then the LJAG would just cover it. So we're working under the auspice of this being a perfect system, and it is absolutely not that. And while I would love for a full cost recovery program to be just implemented across the board so we don't bleed anything, so that every department, every division is taken care of appropriately, those are not actually in place right now. So we're still gathering data, still trying to make sure that we know how it actually works. And when I say that, it's putting together a full cost recovery program, sending that through all the wickets, and Margaret could even respond to this to a degree because I've asked her. It has not been fully implemented by the planning department as a whole, the whole umbrella system yet. So we're still working from a fee study point of view. So it's not going to be perfect right now. And then when you get the differences, I'm sorry, sir, but and then when you get the differences of what a fee costed last year, a particular license or a particular CUP or whatever, to where it is now, it could have been different from last year to this year. We're still learning under this, new CEQA paradigm that just started, the beginning of last year. So it's not perfect yet. We do the best that we can, and staff does the best that they can, but it's still not perfect. But we're working in that direction.
You have to use your mic and speak.
So would it be worthwhile to have a motion that anything over 10,000 from HSN has to come back to the board for approval?
It's the board's pleasure, sir. We'll do whatever.
Are you asking for cannabis only or for
Say it one more
all?
time.
You asking for cannabis only or for all planning?
Cannabis only.
So is that a motion that you're making?
I was asking.
Yeah, I was asking if I could make that, is that doable?
10,000 doesn't seem like.
Anything you say is doable in my world. So whatever you want me to do, that's what we'll do.
Go ahead, Trent.
It would require some more administrative actions and could potentially change the timeline associated with a particular project, having to, come back and ask and get authority and approvals. But is it possible? Yes. Are there implications one way or the other? Yes. But is it possible? Yes.
Sure. Knowing that you don't know completely, Ed, what percentage of this 100,000 do you think HSN is? Just a wild guess.
Well, we exceeded 100,000 last year.
Well, to be clear on your question, SHN is the entire 100,000. I think what you might be asking is what portion is cannabis of SHN's 100,000.
Strangely enough, I just received a text from our accountant, and she said 20% should be considered for cannabis, 40% for planning, and 40% for mining support. So
20%.
I don't want to recommend to the board because I've already made a recommendation to the board as this not to exceed amount. But if you wanted to go and say, what is the percentage that cannabis cannot exceed, and say the number right now, I would say what she just said, which is 20%. So 20,000.
I'd like to make a motion to approve as presented.
I just second, we have a motion here. Do we have a second on Supervisor Gogan's?
I didn't hear.
Was that a motion?
Say it one more time.
If you have a motion, I want to wait. I just thought you were asking questions.
Not a formal motion?
No, I'll take my motion off the table.
Okay.
I move to approve as presented, and then if we
I
have a
will second that.
Yeah. And from a discussion standpoint, my view is if we're talking about $20,000, I know it's all important, especially to the people that are paying the fees on the other end, but that is a drop in the bucket compared to the overall cannabis budget. And we could spend half that much doing accounting to try to come back and do this and that and back and forth and all of that. I think if we can approve this and let you have the funds that you need to do your work, and we have the transparency and the accountability, we could always request that we get an update on how that money was spent. I actually do think that because there is such sensitivity to this, and we are trying to work towards fee for services versus fee study type approach with cannabis, We probably should be doing maybe quarterly updates on the whole cannabis division financials, but I don't think we have to bury this in that bureaucracy.
So thank you. And do you feel like there is enough of a trigger to ask for follow-up conversation on this later that we won't forget about that? Or does that need to be included in a motion so that we're certain? Or what will be our reminder to be sure that we do get the follow-up information?
Can it be included in the department head report? Say in 3 months or something?
By request, that's just reasonable and because I'll forget. I want to make sure you're not going to forget.
I'll put it on my calendar so I won't
Okay.
forget.
All right. Very
If
good.
that's what's needed, that's what we do.
Okay. Thanks. All right. If there's no further discussion, anybody care to make a subsequent motion? All right. With that, we have a motion by Supervisor Lutweiler, second by Supervisor Frazier.
Supervisor Frazier,
Aye.
Supervisor Lutweiler,
Aye.
Supervisor Carpenter Harris,
Aye.
Supervisor Gogan,
Aye.
Chairman Cox.
Aye. All right, thank you. County matters. These items include non-routine or controversial matters and are listed alphabetically by department. A member of the board, staff, or public may request that an item be heard out of order. Board of Supervisors, item 4.1, adopt a resolution which approves Department of Transportation to plow the driveways of Trinity County volunteer fire departments. No fiscal impact. CAO Tuthill, are you introducing the item or is this under Supervisor Lutweiler? There was no one listed.
I believe Supervisor Lutweiler is going to lead this discussion.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Many will remember this actually came before us before. It was kind of on our radar for quite some time, finally got on the agenda. It requires a 4/5 vote. I had recused myself and it did not get the 4/5 vote. We voted last time to bring it back so that it could be considered, whether it's approved or not approved, at least it's considered before we enter our next snow season. And there is a letter on file from the fire chiefs, all in support of this. The Coffee Creek Volunteer Fire Department is the only one that currently is saying they definitely would like this support. The Trinity Center group said they may, but they don't need it at this point. And no other volunteer fire departments indicated they would need the service at this time. But if we approve this, it provides the way for those volunteer fire departments to request and receive clearing of snow in front of their fire stations so that they can get out as volunteers in volunteer paid for gear, equipment, and everything else to save lives. And that's why this is back on the agenda today.
All right, thank you. Are there questions of board members?
Are the ones who are opting into this will say, are there fire stations on a county plowed road already?
They don't. Maybe not.
The question is, are the well, like Coffee Creek, is it on a county road?
Yes.
Yes.
And the other several that have opted in, are they also on county plowed road?
There's only one that's saying they want to do it right now. So I don't know if all volunteer fire departments are on county roads. I don't know if you know, Trent, but and I believe the language does call for the volunteer fire department to provide a right-of-way authority if they choose to pursue this. And so that part would be covered by the process as well.
Yeah, I can't say 100% right now, but and I believe they all are, but I reserve the final answer on that.
Yeah, and I guess my comment was just so we didn't have to get off a county road to do one in particular driveway and throw off the whole planning of how you plow roads. And I understand Coffee Creek and North Lakes concern.
Any other questions? All right, with that, we will open public comment. Is there any in the room? Seeing none, is there any on Zoom?
I have no raised hands.
All right, we will close public comment, bring it back to the board.
I make a motion to approve as presented.
I will second.
Motion by Supervisor Lutwiler, second by Supervisor Gogan.
Supervisor Gogan,
Aye.
Supervisor Lutwiler,
Aye.
Supervisor Carpenter Harris,
Aye.
Supervisor Frazier,
Aye.
Chairman Cox.
Aye. Thank you. Item 4.2, introduce and waive the reading of an ordinance amending Trinity County Code Section 8.44.020 pertaining to general regulations, no fiscal impact. Supervisor Lutwiler.
Okay, I had a number of individuals and people in leadership positions reach out about the possibility of an ordinance to regulate the use of fireworks within Trinity County. And that was brought to the fire chiefs meeting. They unanimously supported something being put in place, basically due to the risks of fires, but also just public health and safety. We're maybe not the only county that doesn't have something in place, but our partnering neighboring counties do have something in place. And without having something in place of our own, we fall back to the state rules, which basically means anybody can use these particular kinds of fireworks anytime they want, in any way they want. And so this would provide a framework that still allows for approved, professionally managed fireworks displays within Trinity County, but it would prohibit having and using these fireworks if you don't have that permission and authorized use. And again, all the fire chiefs weighed in on this. We then worked with county council to come up with language that's seen here. I do believe, county council, you have some additional or change to language that came from Chair Cox reviewing with our Chief Corbett, that there might be one tweak that would help. So I don't know if it's appropriate to go ahead and read that in now so that people's questions and comments are based on that.
Council, if that is proper order, I would appreciate that. Can we do that? Okay, thank you.
One moment, wait, pull it up.
Sure.
I apologize. I thought I had it pulled up, but I must have closed it.
I have it in front of me. Would you like me to read it and you can confirm I'm reading it correctly?
I wouldn't mind, but I did pull it up. So
Oh, you got it? Go ahead.
So the request was made to modify Section A of 8.32.020 under exceptions. In the first line, it had the approval authority as both the local fire chiefs association and the state fire marshals. The understanding that we received from the local entity is that they work in conjunction with the state fire marshal, and so we don't need to provide both, but instead listing it as the authorization in writing by the authorizing the authority having jurisdiction. So it would be the AHJ, authority having jurisdiction. So what it would read is the provisions of this chapter shall not apply to any persons or entity engaging in preparation for or performance of a public firework display unless authorized in writing by the authorizing authority having jurisdiction and conducted in full compliance with any conditions and restrictions placed upon such authorization.
Right, very nice. And then there, just so it's properly read into the record, it's 8.34.020.
Thank you.
Mhm. So with that, are there any questions of board members? All right, hearing none, I'm going to open this for public comment. Any in the room? Okay, any on Zoom?
I have no raised hands.
All right. So I will close public comment and bring it back to the board. And just so that supervisors understand, as it reads, authority having jurisdiction, that can be the fire chief. It can be the state fire marshal, but what was explained to me by our local fire chief was that if somebody local signed off on this, the state fire marshal wouldn't sign off on it anyway, so the and is unnecessary. This also covers a provision where, let's say in 10 years, we had a county fire marshal. This language would incorporate that, so this would not have to be revisited for that reason. So it's all encompassing and it's cleaner language, if that is helpful.
I move to approve as presented.
Second.
As presented as amended.
As amended.
I'm going to remove my second and allow someone else to if they would like. All right, I'll hold it. So motion by Supervisor Lutweiler, second by myself.
Chairman Cox.
Aye.
Supervisor Lutweiler.
Aye.
Supervisor Gogan.
Aye.
Supervisor Carpenter Harris.
Aye.
Supervisor Frazier.
Aye.
All right, thank you. Item 4.3, Clerk of the Board, select proposals for the 45-day public comment period pursuant to Title III Secure Rural Schools and Community Self-Determination Act of 2000, no fiscal impact. CAO Ted Hill.
So we received a number of Title III proposals. They only slightly exceeded the monetary amount to the tune of about $3,000, which is outstanding. So our recommendation is to put forth all proposals out for the 45-day public comment period. And then after that period, then we will reevaluate. And if we need to make any slight monetary adjustments to the overall numbers to fit within that funding authority that we have, we will make that at that time after the 45-day public comment period.
Okay, thank you. Questions?
I understand now from having been involved in this a little bit, but I think just for the public's benefit, can you just talk through a little bit about the Title III funding and how it gets out there for folks to use and then this process? Or I can do my understanding and you can clarify.
Go ahead. Or if Susie's online, I think she is, but she can provide some backstop to us.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I mean, my understanding that, so this is a special set of funding that comes to us, can only be used for these particular kinds of purposes. We put it out to the public in general, but the fire chiefs I know had in a couple of meetings, they talked about different ways that the various entities that are at the Fire Chiefs Association meeting might be putting forward requests. So they all kind of knew what each other was doing and so forth. And then we get all those together. Again, the only way these funds can be used is through these kinds of uses. But then, as you said, if we come in and they're way over, then at some point the board has to decide which ones get funded. In this case, it was beautiful to see. It was, like you said, less than $3,000 difference between what we have available and what was being requested. So, but we still have to go through the process of putting it back out for public comment and assessment. And then at that point, it still comes back to the board to finally approve. And then these funds are available. And it's for things like fuel management, all kinds of great uses for this, but supporting our health and safety. Yes. Okay.
So the one question that I would have is that on Title III funding, my understanding is we have to be able to draw a straight line in with the usage of this funding to use on federal land. And I would have a question about purchase of hydraulic rescue tool known as the Jaws of Life. My understanding is that tool is used for extrication for vehicle accidents. And so I'm wondering if that is an appropriate use. What I do know is that if we are scrutinized for our choice, we run the risk of having to pay the money back, and also we would perhaps not be trusted to the same degree, if at all, with future funding. So we want to be really careful about that. And so I just have a question on that particular use.
No, great question. And that is really what this next phase is for, is to not only get public comment, but for us as a staff to review all of these projects in detail and make sure they in fact meet the specific requirements. and then combine that with any public comments we may or may not get on these, and then present a complete recommendation, to the board. We have, there has not been a detailed analysis done on each specific project to see if it meets all of the statutory requirements to date. In general terms, I mean, they generally look like they do, and monetarily, they generally look like they do. That's why we're making the recommendation to send them all out for public comments. And then we will do that detailed analysis in conjunction with whatever public comments we may or may not get, and then make a final recommendation to the board.
Perfect. Thank you.
But you did highlight something then that I was not aware of. So your understanding is that these funds have to be used on federal lands. I'm seeing Chief Corbett shake his head too, because I thought like we use this for fuels management and they go around and do stuff around people's properties and such. So I'm trying to make sure I'm
Correct.
following
I
this.
don't think it has to draw a straight line to be used on federal lands, and maybe Skylar can chime in anytime she likes, but there's other stipulations. I remember 2 years ago when the last time this was funded, it either had to have a straight line to a federal project, or it had to meet one or more bullet points in the CWPP. And that's where a lot of these projects do the criteria through the CWPP as a Firewise minded project in Trinity County.
Would you consider then the mental division being accidents versus, in other words, we can talk about this offline, because today we're just basically proving it out for public comment and further discussion. So I can clarify my understanding without taking our time today. So yeah, thank you for that. Okay.
I'm curious now too.
Yeah, I think there's a thing there, but
Okay, great.
the specificity. Okay, so with that, we will open item 4.3, public comment. Seeing none in the room, is there any on Zoom?
I have no raised hands.
All right, we'll close public comment, bring it back to the board.
Move to approve as presented.
I will second that.
Motion by Supervisor Lutweiler, second by Supervisor Carpenter Harris.
Supervisor Carpenter Harris.
Aye.
Supervisor Lutweiler.
Aye.
Supervisor Gogan.
Aye.
Supervisor Frazier.
Aye.
Chairman Cox.
Aye, thank you. County Administrative Office Item 4.4, approve a policy entitled Trinity County Seal Logo to authorize the county administrative officer to approve the use of the county seal or logo by non-county entities and/or the public, no fiscal impact. CAO Title.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the follow-up to the ordinance that was presented and approved prior to this meeting. This is the next step in the process to create the actual, policy and guidelines, if you will. So the policy letter is as presented to the board, and that will be the proposed application process and rules that we as a county will follow governing our county seal usage.
Okay. Any questions? All right, no questions. I will open this for public comment. Is there any in the room? Seeing none, is there any on Zoom?
I have no raised hands.
All right, that we will close public comment and bring it back to the board. Oh yeah, she can speak.
Rhoda.
This is item 4.4, right? Yeah.
Correct, yes.
Sorry, I got some stuff happened all of a sudden. I appreciate your patience.
Sure.
Good morning again, board. I appreciate your time. Rhoda Kane from Trinity Center. I get exactly why you're doing this. It makes sense. I just have, a little bit of concern about, it's like we know there's a website already using a version. There's first to publish issues. And I'm just concerned that this action may open the county up to litigation again. And I just would like people to keep that in mind and just think about how how often this county has to pay out lawsuits and how broke we are, and if this is really a bone we want to pick right now. But I get it, I understand, but I just feel really concerned, and I hope that other people will take it seriously. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have no other raised hands.
All right, with that, we will close public comment, bring back to the board. So I would ask a question of council, if you can advise us as to the likelihood that there would be litigation that we would not prevail in to address public concern.
I can't ever give you a likelihood of litigation, nor can I give you a strong likelihood of what the results would be, because I don't really understand what the cause of action would be in this case. This is a procedure and a process that has been done by the county since I started. And prior to that, it's been modified through changes in the program, but it's always been done in the same manner, which has been determined to be in compliance. So I appreciate always looking with an eye for liability, but this is not a high liability item.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right, would someone care to make a motion?
Move to approve as presented.
Second.
Motion by Supervisor Lutwiler, second by Supervisor Gokin.
And just from a comment standpoint, I'm trying to understand Rhoda's concern. I think I have a hard time even imagining what a litigation would be just because we took this action of implementing a policy for an ordinance we've already implemented or approved. It would seem that potential litigation costs of the county would be if we pursued legal action against someone because of them being outside the scope of this policy. And therefore, we're choosing to invest legal funds to protect our seal. And that's our choice. But just because, am I missing something there?
No, you're not. You're not missing something. The other litigation, I guess we could contemplate is potentially if somebody is denied. But again, they don't own the seal. They don't have the right to the seal. And the denial has no appeal rights. So it would not allow them to pursue civil litigation against the county. The reason we draft a policy is to make sure we're consistent in our application, and that would be the exposure. So by doing this, it's actually, in my analysis, reducing any potential liability for us exercising our rights that we're entitled to, again, by law, that have always been there, and just providing that structure so the public is aware of kind of what our rights are. So no, again, I don't see this as a high liability case, and you're correct. It's not a mandatory enforcement. The county has jurisdiction or discretion to enforce it as they feel appropriate.
Okay. So we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? All right.
Aye.
Supervisor Lutwiler.
Aye.
Supervisor Carpenter Harris.
Aye.
Supervisor Frazier.
Aye.
Chairman Cox.
Aye. All right, human resources, item 4.5. Take the following action for the Building and Planning Department effective on September 19th, 2023. Number 1, rename the Building and Planning Department to Community Development Department. 2, approve the job descriptions, set the salary ranges, and add to the alphabetical listing of classifications the following classifications: Deputy Director of Community Development Department at range M252, Building Official Division Director at range M240, Cannabis Division Director at range M240, Environmental Health Division Director at range M240, Planning Division Director at range M240, Natural Resources Division Director at range M240, and Senior Building Inspector at range G216. Number 3, approve amended job descriptions for the following classifications: Building Inspector 1, Building Inspector 2, Code Compliance Specialist 1, Code Compliance Specialist 2, Code Compliance Specialist Lead, assistant planner, associate planner, environmental health technician 1, 2, environmental health specialist 1, environmental health specialist 2, and environmental health specialist 3. Number 4, approve amended job description for the following classification and modify the salary range on the county's alphabetical listing of classifications. Senior planner at range G216. Number 5, modify the department's allocation list by renaming the Building and Planning Department to Community Development Department, renaming the department's divisions to Building Division, Cannabis Division, Environmental Health Division, Planning Division, and adding Natural Resources Division. Replace 1 Deputy Director of Planning with 1 Deputy Director of Community Development Department. In Building Division, add the classification of 1 allocation of Building Official, Division Director, and replace 1 Building Inspector 3 classification with 1 Senior Building Inspector. In the Cannabis Division, replace 1 Division Director classification with 1 Cannabis Division Director classification. In Environmental Health Division, replace 1 Environmental Health Director classification with 1 Environmental Health Division Director. In the Planning Department, add 1 Planning Division Director allocation and decrease 1 allocation from Assistant Planner, Associate Planner, Senior Planner allocations, decreasing from 3 to 2. In the Natural Resources Division, add the classification and 1 allocation of the Natural Resources Division Director, therefore increasing the total department allocations from 30 to 32. Number 6, pursuant to Trinity County Code Section 2.60.360, reclassify employee ID number 02212 from an Environmental Health Director to an Environmental Health Division Director at Step C. Reclassify employee ID number 02244 from Building Inspector 3 to a Senior Building Inspector at Step E. Reclassify employee ID number 03087 from Division Director to a Cannabis Division Director at Step B. And number 7, delete the following classification from the alphabetical listing of classifications: Deputy Director of Planning, Chief Building Inspector 4, Division Director, Environmental Health Director, Building Inspector 3, and Principal Planner. Approximate cost and salary and benefits per month for an Environmental Health Director at range M221F step is $14,649. And for an Environmental Health Division Director at range M240C step is $15,242. Approximate cost and salary and benefits per month for Building Inspector 3 at range M218A step is $11,395. And for a Senior Building Inspector at range G216E step is $11,672. Approximate cost and salary and benefits per month for a Division Director at range M240B step is $14,567. And for a Cannabis Division Director at range M240B step is $14,567. Approximate cost and salary and benefits per month for a Planning Division Director at range M240A step is $13,924. Approximate cost and salary and benefits per month for a Natural Resources Division Director at range M240A step is $13,924. Approximate cost and salary and benefits per month for a Senior Planner at range M218A step is $11,395, and at range G216A step is $9,776.
Should we repeat that?
Nope. For this item, interim HR Director Hamilton, and I believe this is your last big project with us, correct?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for reading all of that. If we ever wondered how many words you could put in a staff report, we may have found it. So thank you. And if you can, well, I'll get to that at the end. Okay. Because I have an addition. Yes, please. So we're going to just walk through this item and just kind of tell the story of how we landed here. And then understanding why we are kind of expanding this title from Building and Planning Department to Community Development Department. So, first and foremost, The current branding of the department is exclusive, and we want to make it inclusive. We have, currently 4 divisions. We're asking in this item to add a placeholder for a 5th division. And as we all know, that's well beyond building and planning. So it also is consistent with industry norms across counties that have shifted and are moving towards kind of this naming at large, considerably in our small county network. And then also, I think when we have this more inclusive titling, it gives us a launching pad for further branding and mission statement development, et cetera. And so just excited to give space and framework for that. A primary note would be for the framework and establishing consistencies across the divisions where there had been inconsistencies, and also creating clear pathways for anyone entering into employment in this department to know and clearly see their path forward, and allowing for good quality succession planning, which is what we want to see across all county departments. And then it gave us an opportunity to see where the strengths of classifications were and where we needed to eliminate, add, modify. And so this process has been a deep dive over the last several months. Also in being a part of and awareness of the county's strategic plans and wanting to create a space for natural resources to exist. This allows for a placeholder, which is a good fit within this county department. I know in years past, it may have been a standalone. I don't believe that we could necessarily support that as its own department now. However, this at least gives a placeholder for future growth and development. And then last is just the closure of, I'll tell you, this has been, I think, 3 CAOs and 4 HR departments. And so since approximately in or about, and county council might have dates better than I, but since 2015, when building and planning used to be housed within Department of Transportation, and that leadership, and then with the addition of cannabis division and separating out, there was an immediate need decision-making done, but not a long-term strategy for staff and then therefore the public on how we navigate. And so this brings closure to that. And while it's not complete in its entirety, it is very, very close to being complete. And so this is a very wordy staff report. So I think a visual will help. Thank you. This was the original, when the interim deputy director and I sat down, we were just looking at, okay, what does, just not necessarily looking at the details of it, it's just more of the visual of this is the setup and how it had been set up. And as our conversations go, we started looking at, okay, let's put placeholders in. Let's formally add the deputy director and really think of each of these building, environmental health, cannabis, and planning as divisions, adding in a natural resources placeholder division, moving the fiscal support that was housed kind of within the cannabis division, which they really serve the whole of the department, moving that under the supervision and direction of either a director or deputy director in consultation with every division, right? Which takes us to really more or less what this staff report comes down to is kind of this slide. And, for those of you who have it closer on your screen, that's fine. But for any of you who could not read the content of this, that's okay. Really, the 3 items that we're doing is, again, adding formally a deputy director to the community development department, moving then the fiscal support in that reporting structure to the top because it's a whole of department. And then as you see in like the second section outlined in red, we're formally adding division directors. And so these are your subject matter experts that are guiding the work of subordinate staff. And these folks in this category then have an equal playing field, if you will, to move up in succession planning. In the blue, we are looking at our lead staff, and where some divisions have lead staff, we're making that equitable across all divisions to have lead staff, and updating the job description so that they can naturally progress into the division director and then the deputy and director roles. And so the work in pouring through every job description was creating that pathway. And then, for example, I mean, I can go into a little bit more detail within building, the building division. We had a building inspector 1, 2, 3 series, and then a building official, or actually it was a building inspector 4 who operated as the building official. So we essentially are retiring that building official, our inspector 4 position, and replacing with a building official / division director. And then in the planning division, we're kind of in the same thread of having kind of a planner 1, 2, 3, but we would call it assistant, associate, senior. There was a principal planner that held like that 4 that we are going to retire and rename planning division director. Now, this conversation today isn't getting into the budget, or are we adding in budgeting towards new allocations that can come in your budget hearings. This is simply framework and allowing for consistencies in succession. I would say that their feedback that we received during this process, which we started in the end of May into June, and then through meet and confer with the union up until actually all through September. One of the things that we anecdotally learned is for our senior planning positions that have been vacant and with failed recruitments, actually getting up to job offer and then those being rejected in the 11th hour. Part of that is in the job description in what we're asking of staff to do as a senior planner, and then expecting them to do once they arrive is more of a division director role and responsibility, tending to commission, planning commission meetings, et cetera, where you really have this mismatch of what we're recruiting for and then what they end up doing. This clarifies and neutralizes that in our best opinion. It also provides just support to the deputy and or director and then to the board. So this flow is what is recommended. As to some of the job descriptions that were changed, content was actually not changed. It was just the reporting and the revising with the department name to reflect the new department name. So what is kind of highlighted in the red or blue box, those ones had more content change to them so that we could kind of achieve our vision here. So next steps of what, what is not reflected in here is the complete and final development of the department head classification. That is something that the CAO and HR will continue to do. That is not a meet and confer issue. So there's a little bit more flexibility with the timing of that. And then, we had some really good feedback from staff on other recommendations that they want to see happen within this. And so those will be also entertained in moving forward. So with that, I am happy to take questions.
Can you first just answer what word is under the picture? Complete updated job description.
Oh.
For the
Complete updated job description for Director of Community Development Department.
Okay, thanks. Thanks.
I know I reached out to Trent on this, but clarifying that the budget that we'll be discussing on the 25th already reflects anything here, because this isn't necessarily, even though I think there were 2 new positions being created, they weren't funded. And so there isn't you approve this and the budget proposal is already out of whack.
Correct.
Kind of approach.
Correct. Now, the There are it's minimal adjustments as there's a couple of staff shiftings that are occurring. And the 2 additional allocations essentially are the placeholder for the Natural Resource Division Director. And then the second is for the building official title, because we do have allocations filled within that series. So we didn't want to remove anyone from that series. So those are the 2 added.
Okay.
Without budget. So.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions of board members?
I have questions. I just don't know the exact way to phrase it. I get my biggest question would be, can you see how this is going to make it make what we call now building and planning more efficient? Because when I look at this, I see a top heavy department, and I want to know how that's going to efficiently run. We'll have 7 allocations for division directors, deputy director, and a director. And underneath that, we were looking at like 17 other allocations. So to me, that's top heavy. That's a lot of bosses for not a lot of staff. So is that going to create something that's efficient? Because right now we don't have that. And no offense to Ed, but we don't have an efficient building planning environmental health department. And that's what I would like to see is efficiency.
So I will attempt to answer your question without a crystal ball. Best standard practices are a supervisory ratio of 1 boss to 5 to 7 staff. This kind of builds that out. Now, the CAO could sit down with this department and decide, do we need both a director and a deputy director, or is one of the 2 sufficient? In this structure and the way the job classifications are written intentionally would allow for both or one or the other. In the same way that the division directors, I would, if I had my health and human services hat on, I would compare that to what we house as a program manager, right? They're managing a singular program activity. And in the absence of one, the deputy or director would fill in for that spot. So we intentionally designed flexibility to where you don't have to have all 7 staff to be efficient. Now, there are certain ones with building code or environmental health minimum qualifications that definitely come into play. But even in the sequencing of the building staff, a senior building inspector is written so that they can perform as a building official when needed, because the requirements are the same. So we try to be as flexible in that to where we can be efficient even when we have less staff per se. And of course, efficiencies build when our budget and support of staff grow. And so I think it's an all-team effort in that. I think we have very competent, capable staff. And I think this framework allows for further support of a department as a whole.
So I'll add to that. So I think your view of the organizational chart, if all those positions were actually filled, would be a true statement as far as top heavy management wise to a degree. But when you look at what Liz just commented about as far as supervisor ratios, it's not. My vision and what we have funding for right now, we don't have funding to fill all those positions. That's why Liz has been commenting as far as, we will either fill like a deputy or a director. We will fill one or the other. Now, if this county happens to come across a commercial property or a housing boom residentially or some other process where we have a lot more fees coming in, a lot more permits, a lot more activity, this structure allows us to grow into that much more quickly and more flexible than the old structure does. And this structure allows for somebody to come in as a new employee in any one of those divisions at the lowest level possible. And now there is a direct path for them to the, potentially the department head position or beyond, up to this position or other positions within the county. And in the past, that has not been done. They were very much stagnant at their stovepipe professional division, if you will. And that was another big objective of this.
I think that's a huge morale builder in the way you're not topped out. And you know you're going nowhere. I think having this concept where you
So
can- you
let's
can't-
save opinions for just a second and leave this to just questions. We'll take public comment and then you can have all of that space that you want.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, with that, we will open public comment. Is there any in the room?
Good afternoon, board and chair. I'm Bella Headkey. I've been the associate planner, assistant planner for about 5 years in the planning department. So I'm just going to read my notes that I took throughout this process of mulling over everything. While I understand the intent behind the proposed structuring of the community development services and respect the work that went into it, I would regret it if I didn't provide input on the topic, being that I've been, as I said, working here for 5 years, and I've become intimately aware of, why we are inefficient, why we don't have fast processing times, why projects fail before they even start. It's a disheartening thing to see, but that's a career also. So I accept that. So long processing times in planning reduce the number of projects that are submitted, and many of the projects that are submitted struggle with maintaining economic viability through the end of the review process. I have concerns that if we decrease the pay scale of the senior planner, which is already not competitive with neighboring jurisdictions, and remove the benefits that come with being in the management unit, then Trinity County will not be able to compete with the limited candidate pool of California planners. I hope the county tries to set ourselves up to attract and retain a team of planners in order to promote economic growth in Trinity County, or else the county will be stuck allocating funding to outside consulting firms in order to fill the need for experienced planners, which I very much have appreciated and learned from SHN throughout my years. But being here is it's a different experience. You have to build those agency contacts. Walking down the hall is far more different than calling on Zoom, just because you can get that immediate feedback and they know the players in the room and all of that kind of stuff. So I just wanted to add that to the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other public comment in the room, is there any on Zoom?
Adrian Keys.
Thank you, supervisors, chair, staff. I really appreciate Ms. Hamilton's presentation. It made this much more clear to me. I do wish, and I understand all the difficulties in putting staff reports together, but it would have been great to have that included in the packet, because it answered a lot of questions, but it did still leave some. I think the main question that it answered for me was what the Natural Resources Division status was. I would sure hope that before that division is actually stood up, that there's a really solid mission statement, because I'm not really certain what a Natural Resources Division would do here. I understand that what they do elsewhere, but as far as like relative to other existing departments and divisions, what the point of that would even be. And it certainly, at this time seems, well out of our budgetary potential to stand up an entirely new division. And if that division were to be stood up, I would hope that it would be staffed adequately to be effective. It seems that there was only one position for the entire division. So again, I'm just not really certain what it's for. And I don't work at the county. I don't work for any sort of I don't have a great grasp of how union scale and all that works. Very complicated. But I would have to agree with Ms. Headkey specifically about the efficacy of the planning division or department division. I guess it's still a department. We need a team of staff. The constant turnover, lack of staff, slowed project down to the point where they die on the vine, bleeds people out, and does not leave a good taste in their mouths for doing business in Trinity County. So whatever steps are taken, I hope that that is the direction that we're headed. And so I want to support our staff here and all the hard work that's gone into this planning process. I absolutely think, I understand Ms. Hamilton's description of how it allows for progress up through the chain. I guess that makes sense from that sort of a perspective. Overall, I think most of my questions were answered in the presentation, but I just want to see whatever actions are taken to create efficiency in the planning department and get us some staff that doesn't turn over quite so much. Turning over staff has its own built-in cost. I know that from running restaurants before. There was an associated cost with every single time that you lost an employee and had to hire a new one. In many, many cases, might be hard to work out in the budget, but it can be much more effective to provide a viable salary for those employees versus just turn and burn through employees. And we just don't have that much access to potential staff as it is. So thank you.
Thank you.
I have no other raised hands.
Okay, with that, we will close public comment, bring it back to the board.
Want to comment on?
I'm, if it pleases the chair, I'm happy to respond to.
Yeah, that would be great.
provide
Thank you.
Information, yeah.
Mhm.
And I appreciate both comments. Those were at length discussed, actually. And so as to natural resources, essentially it is a placeholder. I would recommend the leadership of the community development department really map out a plan in thoughtfulness in moving forward when we're ready to fill that and budget for that and conceptually just move it forward. I would actually join in Mr. Key's statements and thoughts. Those were shared by staff. What was important is when we're writing up job descriptions to be inclusive of the long-term vision so that we're setting appropriate wages and compensation classification expectations. So we didn't want to have to come back and do this again with those positions. We wanted it now. And so it really does just serve as a placeholder until it can be moved forward when leadership is ready to do that. And then purposes, funding, all those good questions get to be sorted out by someone else. So I hope that provides some context, at least in the thoughts of staff as we kind of discuss this and move this through. As to Ms. Kedke's comments, we spent a lot of time mulling over the exact same items that she brought forward. We shared in those. And so when we look at the progression of the three planning classifications, the assistant, associate, and senior planners, we have to keep in mind a certain financial degree of separation between the two. And then when we get to the ceiling, we have to look at the minimum qualifications for those roles compared to other roles within the department so that we're not causing compaction. And so when we did move the senior planner and the building inspector 3, we took those from a management position to general unit position. So we changed bargaining units.
Can you pause for 1 second? Ashley, would you put that flow chart back up while she's describing this?
The one with the red and
Thanks, that would help me.
Thank you.
Sorry to do that to you, Liz.
That's okay.
Okay, thank you.
That's okay. So when we level set basically the senior building inspector and the senior planner into this blue line, we had to move them from one bargaining unit, management unit, to the general unit and set appropriate wages that were not going to cause compaction for anyone below or above them. And that is how we were able to set the recommended compensation that's before you today. And I would agree, if there was an analysis of all of the classifications, not just one, we get into compaction when we look at one separate from the rest. And when we look at what certifications and minimum qualification requirements across all of these positions, the analysis, it's a deep dive. And So for what we have right now, given the minimum wage increases that we just adjusted for in July, this is the appropriate wage setting. Now, if the board's pleasure wanted to have a complete analysis and bring back a competitive salary to that of other jurisdictions, that would be at the board's direction to do that. That's not in this package today. But I hear the sentiment of staff because I understand that. I don't believe, in my opinion, that we're going to lose less applications for a senior planner when they get to see and experience that there's promotional growth above them to become a planning division director and beyond. And that what we were requiring of a senior planner is more in line of what you would require of a senior planner. I feel like we were asking much more of them in the past. And so when we come to just workload and what that looks like, what we're proposing today is appropriate. So if that helps provide some of that context, I hear those thoughts and I appreciate those thoughts and we shared those as well.
Okay, thank you. Okay, are there other questions or would somebody care to put a motion on the table?
I just, one quick follow-up to that discussion we were just having. So I'm looking at the numbers here and kind of what I'm hearing you say is that what we've been asking of a senior planner now would actually be what we would be hiring as a division director of
Correct.
planning.
Correct.
So that would go, instead of being at the 216A step, that would be more of an M240A step
Correct.
to start with. So it would actually
Be more
possibly be more compensation than what we're offering right now for the same job.
Correct.
Okay.
And Chair Cox, I would like to add, we're going to amend an oversight, so I apologize. Because we have an interim deputy director position right now with the formal titling, we would need to update the interim titling for the deputy director in the motion moving forward.
Okay. Can you tell us what that would look like in this language?
Well, it's council, you have to assist because we are asking for to replace in item number 5, the third bullet, we are replacing Deputy Director of Planning with Deputy Director of Community Development Department. And we need to apply the same interim status to both.
So I actually sent you a text just to make sure. Trent can do this outside of it because an interim appointment does not require board action. So we'll prove it as amended. I mean, not as amended, prove it as with the board's pleasure, approve it as is. And then Trent and HR can make sure the classifications are correct. Thank you for catching that.
So never mind, withdrawn.
Okay, good.
There's enough here.
So I would be looking for a motion from somebody in order to entertain further discussion between ourselves.
Move to approve as presented.
I will second.
All right. With that, motion by Supervisor Lutweiler, second by Supervisor Gogan. Supervisor Gogan, you had some comments if you would.
No, I
care
think
to.
I had them answered. I guess one of them was my opinion that with this structure, I think it's good to know that you can start out the bottom floor and end up being at the top floor someday. I don't know how much, when people top out here and there's nowhere else to go, I don't know how much attrition that causes us with people just, well, I can't go any further. So should I go somewhere else? Would I pay more? So I think this is a good step towards maybe retaining some of our better help and morale. So I like it. It's a good move.
Yes. I just would like to say that I'm pleased to see the Natural Resources Division Director added in as a placeholder with the amount of work that our county interfaces with in the natural resources communities. I think that this is a viable request at some point. Hopefully it will get filled, but there will be plenty to do for whomever is given this position someday.
Agreed. I can't tell you the number of times, and I wish I'd kept a little log of, oh, this is a perfect job that would fall squarely under a natural resources division. That statement has been made multiple times over the last, my little tenure of 2.5 years. And I wish I did have some bullets to look down, but those times when it came up, there was a really big need. And there were public needs that could have been easily filled and met by that so cleanly without having to grab someone's workload from within another department or and take their time away from that and figure out how that's going to then be built out. So, and it's something that we have looked toward when we did our strategic planning, which you well pointed out, that seems like such a positive step in the right direction. It's exciting to see a great big desired box get checked if this does work for us today.
I just want to thank you for providing a definition for clear as mud when I was reading through this the first time. I was like, what? You're hurting my brain. But thank you for making it much more understandable as you walked us through it.
Right. And if anything too, I mean, I feel like you did say this, but just for clarity, I had spoken with CIO about this in the interim, just looking at, we're going from 30 allocated positions to 32, and he clarified for me, these are unfunded. So if anybody has the same question I did, that would come back before the board for the funding for that. So there's that. All right. Is there any further discussion? Okay.
Supervisor Gogan,
Aye.
Supervisor Leutwiler,
Aye.
Supervisor Carpenter Harris,
Aye.
Supervisor Frazier,
Aye.
Chairman Cox.
Aye. All right, that passes. Thank you. And Director Hamilton, thank you for your all your work. And I guess this brings a bit of closure to the HR capacity that you have filled in for us. So just want to say thank you kind of in an encapsulating way for all of it. Appreciate that. Thanks. Okay. All right, moving into closed session, item 5.1, Government Code Section 54954.5B, Conference with Real Property Negotiators, address 430 Morgan Hill, Hayfork, California. Agency negotiator Trent Tuthill and Margaret Long, negotiating party to be determined. Under negotiation, price and terms of sale and payment. And item 5.2, Government Code Section 54954.5E, Public Employee Evaluation, County Administrative Officer. Is there any public comment on closed session items? See none in the room. Is there any on Zoom?
I have no raised hands.
All right, that we will close public comment and close the open session portion of our meeting. Thank you.